Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Worship Guitar Show number 29. It is a pleasure to have you with us this evening. This is going to be a really interesting show. It's an interesting time, but most importantly, I want to really have a conversation about a topic I think all of us wonder about. Some of us have ventured to either extreme of the big church, little church spectrum. And there was a very interesting call that Bruce Adolph, the publisher of Worship Musician, and I were on today. It was basically a Zoom call with somebody that will be featuring in the magazine sooner than later. But a number of things came up over the conversation that were deeply inspiring and really got both Bruce and I thinking about a bunch of different things around a number of very powerful verticals. And in particular, as it relates to this show, it's like this whole big church, little church thing. Does it really, really matter? Having been at big churches, little churches, one could argue that we sometimes get distracted from the main event, which is Jesus. It's about the people coming through the door. It's that, in a big church there's all this production and all this stuff and all this staff and all the stuff that can come along with that. Where at a small church there's this little tiny staff trying to piece all the pieces together, where on one hand we're all kind of broadcasting to YouTube or Venmo or Facebook, and it's hard not to kind of go, here's our broadcast with I muted that guy over there, so that's this one. On one hand, the idea is that we're broadcasting to our audience, but it's kind of hard not to notice. Like, there's Stephen Furtick with 5 bazillion people watching, and here we are with our 100. I think what's really exciting about this conversation, and I hope you leave this as inspired as I left the Zoom meeting that we were on, is that it really makes us think about some of the things that we don't think about, I will say, enough. And first of all, what I love about some of the feedback that I've been getting from people who've been tuning into this community is that we're having an opportunity to kind of come together and do the community thing in a time where our extended communities are not meeting in the ways that we were used to and in the ways that many of us need them to. So with that said, one of the neat things about having, and this is kind of my point, is that sometimes the smaller the group, the easier it is to get right down to business. Like, if any of you either attend larger churches or have been to larger churches, you understand that there's a dynamic that can happen when you're in the infrastructure of a larger church, and it just seems like the boat moves really slowly, and to get the rudder to turn seems to take way more energy than it seemingly should take. That is Facebook over here. I obviously have become popular in the middle of this broadcast, and I like to keep that browser window open over here, but it's being a little persnickety, which means I'm going to need to don these, which is fine. So here's the thing. As we look at the perspective, actually, that's not going to solve that problem either. And I don't want to close that browser window because that could have very bad end results, and I'm not going to close that one. So let me just get rid of a couple little things in Facebook and see if that solves this problem. Okay, while I'm doing that, here is the thing. Oh, got it. I've got a guy that is messaging me prolifically simultaneously. So here's the thing. A small church has the benefit of having much higher levels of intimacy for people who come in. And a larger church has the ability to have a greater number of places where people can find that intimacy, right? And having led, a small group in a larger church, I understand the benefits of people kind of finding that group and that community, whether it's geographical or whether it's focus or whatever that meets their needs. And they're both of those are tremendously powerful. But I think in the age that we're in, it's very easy for us to get a little overly focused on this metrics thing. And I said this a few weeks back. about this particular community here is like a number of the people that I know in social media and in the gear world are really talking about the fact that the larger numbers don't necessarily mean a better connection. So I really want to just I want to pull up a couple of things from my notes from this conversation, and then I want to dig into some people's comments and get your thoughts, big church, little church. But there were a couple of things that I pulled out of the conversation that I was just like, I've just got to share it with you guys tonight. I was immediately like, I know where this is going. This particular quote was one of my favorites. When you have unity, you have miracles. I don't know about you, but I was just like, I was floored by that. And miracles happen at big churches, little churches. This is not going to be bag on the big church thing. This is not going to be bag on the little church thing. It's just kind of just going like, hey, there are differences. And for those of us that have spent time and spend time in smaller churches, where it seems like everything that we do, although we may be able to turn the ship easier, it just kind of gets, it just gets, we easily kind of go, well, we're across the video channel from, Stephen Furtick. But the thing is that the relevance we have in our communities is where God has us planted. And I know that we know this, but sometimes, this whole thing about when you have unity, you have miracles, that really kind of just made me think of like, well, what is unity about? That's a lot easier to achieve in a smaller church. Not that everybody should be, of the same mind. That's not where I'm going with that. But the concept of like, without that unity, we don't see the miraculous happen. That doesn't mean God can't do miracles without unity. But the heart and soul of that was, we've got to be standing shoulder to shoulder in unity as we do this. And I found that more often than not, I found those experiences more prevalent in smaller churches. And the moral of tonight's story is going to be, is like, you know what? It doesn't have to be bigger to be better. And because so many of us, we first of all, we think about the Hillsongs, we think about the Bethels. The interesting thing is when we think about how we want our worship to sound, what are the first things we think of? We think of the Hillsongs and the Bethels, and so on and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, it becomes easy to compare the disparity between where we are and where those churches are, as opposed to kind of going, that's awesome for Hillsong and Bethel. And I know that we kind of know this on one level, but it's another thing to just kind of go, that's great. That's working for them. What about only our congregation and only the people that are going to tune into our YouTube channel and only the people that are going to watch us on Facebook and those people? Where are we there? We're not looking to get an extra 10 people tuning into YouTube. How about the people that are there and only the people that are right there? How are we doing with that? How are we managing with that which God's put in our hands? And arguably, the smaller the group of people that is, the better a job we can do of meeting their needs. So with that said, let me see if I can take a look at some of the, and as you've heard me mention before, stuff that's coming in on Facebook because of the type of feed we've got, I can't see. Stuff that comes in on YouTube, I can see on this computer. First of all, Brad, hello. Great to see you. Chris Alexander, hello. I should say Brad Miller, hello, since I'm going to first and last name. Dean Anderson, hello. Matthew Winter, hello. Awesome. Let's see here. Okay, hold on a second. Boy, Matthew always jumps right in. Let me see who we've got over here on Facebook. And I did a couple of things here. I've kind of changed my setup a little bit here. There we go. All right, so this gets minimized, and this goes over here, and then we get over here. Good. All right, excellent. All right, so good. Let's do this. There we go. And all right, Lonnie, great to see you. I hope your wait wasn't too long. Excellent. Good, good, good. Miguel, how are you? Great to see you here. Uh, uh, I wouldn't be anywhere else but here. Uh, we have okay. So I'm reading from Lonnie J. Good, by the way. We have from 60 to 80 on any given Sunday. The church is about 100 years old. There we go. Change in direction is very difficult, but if you're going in the right direction, there you go. Brett, hello, good to see you. So, Lonnie, I'm gonna dig in with that comment there, and Matthew, we're gonna come back to you in just a moment because I'm non sequitoring here. But so here's the thing. It's you hit on one of my favorite church groups that is really one of the hardest to navigate. And I'm going to project a little bit, but feel free, Lonnie, to kind of jump in and just kind of go, you're either right on target or you're slightly off target. But this challenge of churches that have been around, and you said it perfectly, 100 years. First challenge is, and I love this because way back 100 years ago, there were these young whippersnappers that were like, we're going to go start our own church. We're going to plant it here. We're going to do the new style of organ worship. It's going to be awesome. And as the generations continue on, the founding fathers and the ones who, each generation kind of rested on their shoulders, they have a tendency to want to have that which was familiar. Again, I think last week I made the analogy, the Our God analogy. That song has got to be right at this point. I think it's at the decade mark. But people love that song. And I will go so far as to say people that are a little older in particular love that song because it allows them to go back to a place that's comforting, that is worshipful, and is familiar. Operative word being familiar here, right? So the young generation wants to find the next familiar, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that tension where the somebody is invariably going, okay, we're at 60 or 80, how do we become 120 or 160? Where somebody else is going, this 60 and 80 thing, I'm going to project a little further. It's entirely possible that had it been a church of 200, and gradually as people aged out and started going to more contemporary, quote-unquote, churches, the congregation got smaller. That poses a very interesting range of questions that I've had that same group of questions trying to make sense of that. And one is always kind of going, well, we want to reach more people. Nothing wrong with that. But are we always, always, always checking into going, well, God, how big do you want us to be? How many campuses do you want? I'm not saying that leaders don't ask those questions, but I'm saying I think we sometimes answer those questions before we actually wait to hear from God. And the point being is that the 60 to 80 to 100 to 200 person church, that's the main average sized church. And if we're trying to be something we're not called to be, we're missing the call of what we are called to be. And that's really, again, kind of the heart and soul of kind of the epicenter of what I wanted to talk about tonight. Because, if we're chasing, not for the wrong reasons, but like, hey, we want to get above 200, we've seen 10% growth. Metrics are an important way to measure this, the number of people we reach with this show. But at the same time, if I have a really quality experience with people, I'm like, well, God's got this thing a lot more in control than I do. So you know what? I'm going to get nice and comfortable. I'm going to love the fact that I get some of these messages from some of the folks who are like, hey, I haven't been in community. You have no idea what the show has done to just kind of scratch that itch. Craig, I see your comment here. Let me grab Matthew here. So here we go. 500 size, mid-size 500 is between all the services. The disciples were in one accord. They're sent to having like-minded people in a congregation. My phone just killed the joke. Oh well. In any case, the point being is that what's great about it's an interesting thing. I'm going to make an analogy here. I think last week we were talking about, if we're in a uh, if we're kind of in a mainstream band, we rehearse X amount, and we do this and we do that. We're always looking for the bigger, the better, that lead vocalist that's great, and that personality-driven front man or front woman. And I think to a certain extent, when we look at the Furticks and all of that, we kind of sometimes project that, and I'll be guilty of this, on our pastor going, well, as the church grows, I think they can do this, and I can see this on them. And sometimes we're actually just pushing all this stuff as opposed to well, forget about as the church grows. If the only thing we care about, quote unquote, is really what happens in the next 6 days, I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you that in the time that I was a worship creative arts director, if I'd just been focused, all I really care about is either the next 6 days or this next rostered period that the songs and the worship team is rostered. If that was really all that I was really focused on, I would have done a very different type of job. I would have had a very different type of focus. I was on the executive team at the church at the time, so I was very focused on how we're going to grow, how we're going to reach people, which is a part of the dialogue you want to have. But the dialogue was always a presumption that we were going to grow. It was never about well, okay, well, what if we don't grow? God's obviously got his hands in that. What do we do differently? All the energy we spend trying to reach people and putting billboards on the back of buses, what if we spent that time, energy, money, prayer, just going, pour that into our existing congregation? What does that look like? And that's where the concept of big church, little church doesn't matter. If as little churches we're trying to behave like big churches because we're wanting to become a medium-sized church or a large church, or if we're a mid-sized 500 person, either single site or multi-site congregation, and we're wanting to become 5,000 as opposed to going hey, you know what? We are just right where we are. I think we live in a world where, acquisition seems to be a thing. We want to get more people through the door. We want to get more people saved. That's a different metric. But I think I think sometimes we don't have the best questions to best serve the dialogue. Does that make sense? All right. Let's see here. Chris Lucas, I think production-heavy churches need a specific type of team that is extremely in tune with current... I'm sorry, I'm turning my face to the side here, so please forgive, because I can't pull that into the chat here. And arguably, I could pull that up over here. But for right now, Craig Lucas, I think production-heavy churches need a specific type of team that is extremely in tune with current tech, and they can kind of focus on everything else without being distracted. We tried a click track in our small church, and it was distracting. We now can just focus on listening to the Spirit and being immersed. I love that word, by the way, one of my favorite words. Sorry for the long comment. Great comment. So let's just dig into that with the knife and the fork and the chopsticks and all the stuff that's there. First of all, you just kind of echo what I was just kind of getting at. Right, wrong, or in between. When as small and medium-sized churches, we start to do that. And first of all, I am a fan of playing with the click. But there are times that for the right team, it's the wrong move. Because all of a sudden, and here's the thing, that's not to say I'm anti-technology, anti-growth, anti-training the drummer who doesn't know how to play with the click, or getting bass player and drummer playing with the click. That's not what I'm saying. But I will tell you, I flippin' hate these things. I just loathe having this in my ear for a couple of reasons. I'm a little old school, I'll admit it. 2, I want to hear the sound in the room. Because if I can't hear the sound in the room, I can't hear the sound in the room. Am I going to trust some mic up there that how do I say this nicely and affectionately? I love volunteer sound people. How am I supposed to trust a an ambient mic in some place. I would never want to actually listen to the service from some suspended microphone and going, well, now I've added in ambience. That's what it sounds like. I know that's not what it sounds like. That's just me. But when I actually can listen to actually what's going on in the room instead of my mix of that distillation, which I'm going to mix differently than the person back there at the board, as opposed to kind of going, well, how does it sound in the room? As long as I'm not making too much noise, that allows me to go, oh, I'm just playing too loud. And, this is an interesting thing. And yes, how do I say this again? Your average sound tech, as a guitar player, I can think that what I think isn't too loud actually is too loud for them. So I'll admit that. But I can also, as a guitar player, have a much better sense of when I'm like, oh, I am too loud. I need to turn down in a way that a volunteer sound tech may not necessarily know that, right? And the other thing is when techs change from week to week, oh, you're too loud, you're too quiet, you're too loud, it's perfect. You're like, it's like Russian roulette. Who knows who you're going to get. Point being is it's a great comment. And the idea is all of a sudden now we've bought in. Let's do the LED panels behind us. Let's get the click. Let's bring in all this stuff. And now all of a sudden we're like kind of like, it sounds more like, and this is the thing, I can say this because we're really good friends with the multi-tracks people. They're like, don't sound like the record, sound like you. And arguably, just fill in some holes if you need to fill in the holes. Don't try and sound like Bethel or Hillsong, because you will have a Milli Vanilli moment. They don't say it, but I do. Eventually, you're going to have a Milli Vanilli moment where people kind of go, then what have we been hearing, right? I love that. All right, let me poke over here. Ooh, Chris Alexander, like ninja comment. So with the older and newer, it would seem like older churches may not have an electrical system, a band. Would you, what would you say are the minimum requirements? Okay, so I'm going to digest that with my own. I'm going to Doppler size that. So here's the thing, is that this is another. I'll go there. So this is another great point. All right, so a smaller church, or one of the things is that we've just launched in this production cycle, Músicos Adoradores, which is a Spanish-only worship magazine, because we know there are a ton of really under-resourced Spanish-speaking churches in the United States and throughout the Americas. We really felt called to do something to serve them. A lot of those churches, they're like, that'd be great. We'd love to have everybody on in-ears and personal monitors. Let's get the Behringer, blah blah blah. Let's get an LED panel. But we don't have the money to do it. All of a sudden, your tithes have a huge reflection in a way that many of us have never had to have those considerations. And in that sense, it's a very different perspective. So, the idea of like, we've got a couple of wedges that we've had, for 20 years, the same PVPA that we got, 25 years ago, we still use that PVPA. I think, the concept of, I think it's very hard when you kind of go, this is the resources that we got. And this is, again, it's a great point. The moral of the story is where we are is where we are. Are we living to try and get to somewhere next? And yes, we want to be looking across the Jordan going, what's next? That's part of the thing. We want to have vision. Without vision, the people will perish. We want to have vision. But the other thing is, part of the vision, I think, has to relate to where we are today and the immediate tomorrow. It doesn't say the vision has to be for, when the church doubles in size and you have to add 4 more campuses. I don't think that's what the heart and soul of that word was. I think the heart and soul is we do need to look ahead. But we also need to have the judiciousness to kind of go, if we're the same size next year, how much more have we served our congregation of the size that we're at? So, the idea of the system and all, if we're going to be small next year, great. We don't need in-ear monitors. We don't need the band distracted from being able to hear what's going on. It's a great point, Chris. I love that. Oh, look at this. Yeah. And this is an interesting thing. Is that, if you break apart the word revolution, you have re-evolution, right? Which is to say that things are evolving. Like we're not, the funny thing is, I think I mentioned it here, uh, was that, Darlene Scheck had gone to do worship at a church, and they brought an electric keyboard. And they basically, the church said to her afterwards, well, you won't be coming back because you brought that thing here. That you won't be welcome again. And, so there is this natural progression of from what's been in the past to what's in the present. And the interesting thing is that, this comment that this guy had today, which was, when you have unity, you have miracles. He didn't say you have to have unity to have miracles, but when you have unity, you have miracles. That is to say, the fruit of being together. And I think a lot of the time we're so willing to fight and get in the ring with the people that we're inclined to join arms with, and kind of go, we need a new PA, we need in-ear monitors, we need to be playing with the click, we need to be playing with multi-tracks, we need to be doing all these things because that's the way forward, because that's what we're going to do. And some wise older congregant, post 50, hello, is kind of going, that may seem more attractive than the end result of what you're going to get. Now, here's the unfortunate part, is that we don't always bring our best selves to these conversations. Which is to say, it's like, hey, you know what? Let's sit around a meal where we have the conversation, how we have the conversation, and who we invite into the conversation. Because I think it is important to bring the voices of quote-unquote discord, but also in so doing, discord is one of the best places to build unity, because when you can bring people who have differing opinions together in unity, you have miracles. Just kind of go, look, we're not all going to be happy, but let's all agree to be unified. And the interesting thing is that I did a live stream with Gateway Worship, and it was an interesting thing that happened. I don't think I mentioned on this show, but there was a guy that kind of came in, and they kind of had and I was talking about a songwriting session, because it was basically talking about the song, and we were talking about the songwriting session that had basically been where the song came from, and somebody came in on chat and like, I don't believe in the songwriting sessions. I think it's all kind of prescribed and canned and all of that. And I'm interviewing these people. It's a live stream, and I'm seeing this comment, and I'm kind of going, do I like the comment? Do I not like the comment? I'm doing the interview. The interview's going on, and finally went, you know what? I'm going to bring this into the conversation. Because, it's easy to just go, we're going to mute that conversation. We're going to pretend that didn't happen. We don't want to hear that voice. It's discord of us. Like, hey, you know what, guys? There's a comment in here in the chat that is actually, I want to bring into things. Like, when I mentioned Desmond Child, who's a very famous secular songwriter, that they get paid beaucoup, or got paid beaucoup bucks to write a formula. And one could arguably go, hey, this formula thing, that's probably happening in Nashville. And the worship leader, the moral of the story here, went on to say, the interesting thing is that, first of all, only the songs that really have something on them rise up. But further, of the songs that they'd been involved in that rose up, they always had to sacrifice. They had to carry something up the mountain, light that fire, and actually had to kind of give up something about that song for that song to actually come to that place. It had to be out of a place not of worship, but also of worship and sacrifice, right? So the interesting thing is, it's a lot easier to have unity when we agree. Unity when we don't agree is where God kind of gets in and goes, this is what I'm talking about, because we can prefer one another. We don't have to agree, but if we choose that unity is going to be more important than what I want or what you want, then we're going to find a common ground that we can go, you know what? We can build a bridge together. That's incredibly powerful. I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you very much for Claw Dog. Woohoo! All right. Let me jump over here. Craig, Lucas, age plays a huge factor. You got to massage the older church into slow growth. Interesting strategy. So here's the interesting thing. Is that, there is... it's funny, when I think of that traditional conversation, it is usually or frequently polarized, where the older generation really is um, wants to hold on tightly to the reins, and the younger generation has a degree of passion, sometimes bordering on the edge of desperation, to see change comes. So there's a relevance to the people they would like to invite to come to the church. Those are they're both really legitimate things. And speaking of, the older generation, at a time when you're watching, your earning capacity going down, today there's COVID. When you're older, you don't quite know what's going to happen. Or are you, what's going to happen with your health care? What's going to happen with your health? What kind of country are you going to be living in? Where are things going to be at? To be an older person at the end or post your earning years, that's already a scary place. So losing the things that you have control over is this process that's challenging you on an emotional level over and over. And, if we look at all our Christian brothers and sisters, most of us are not the picture of emotional maturity or spiritual maturity for that matter. We're all growing. We're all trying to get there. The reality is sometimes people get older and they still haven't gotten the kind of like, well, I'm supposed to be the Samuel. I'm supposed to be the wise. I'm supposed to be if we go modern, what are some of the things that we're going to lose? What about the people that have been here for 20 years that don't want a drummer that has no idea how to actually play to the room? So, let's use a couple of obvious examples. The problem is if I'm older, I may not necessarily have the language other than say, well, what if we find all the things that we think are such a great idea aren't such a great idea? The point being is when we have mature conversations is how we kind of begin to kind of go, okay, well, look, we don't want the church to die. All the things that you poured that energy into for all these decades, do you want to see that not reach a generation for Jesus? Well, no, we don't want that. And can you agree that the music, having some modern take to it is important to that? And then you get a chance to kind of, play the baby slicer. Gosh darn it. You basically go, well, here's the thing is if you had a choice of having a congregation that's basically going to die out playing old music or one where we can figure out the blend of this, where it will continue on, which would you rather see? You already know what they're going to say. It's just the way you frame the conversation. You do it in a non-manipulative way, but in a way you kind of remind them, like, do you really want this thing to just age out and die with the last person of your generation? Well, of course not. That's not what you want. That's not what God wants. But sometimes you have to just kind of engage people into the conversation. Okay. Oh, wow. Jeffrey Hatch. Hey, what's going on? First of all, thanks everybody for hanging out tonight. This is going to be about positive and wins. Okay, so these are tough subjects, but positivity and wins. We are all about, there's one actually, I want to leave you guys with one. I'm going to take it as a God word because I'm not smart enough. The metric that we want to be counting is wins. That is a metric. All right, Jeffrey Hatch, what's going on? Why are sound crews and leaders allergic to allowing the guitar player to use an amp in service? I recently wanted to buy a 1-watt Marshall amp to be able to have some control over my tone and disparity between rhythm and solo levels. Gotta love this guy. It was not allowed. Thou shalt not marshal. You read martial law. Oh, sorry. I'm having fun with this because I've been in all the range. If it can happen, I've been part of it somehow. It was not allowed. It was a 1-watt app. I asked about a processor. No, I played for 49 years, but my experience is overruled by someone who doesn't have the experience or doesn't play an instrument at all. Okay. So great point. I absolutely love that. Arguably, with maturity, one of the best ways to get an amazing worship guitar sound and if we're talking about reverb and ambience and all of that, is actually playing through some cabinets, facing the back wall, dispersing that sound and reflecting it off the back wall, just in the same way that drums have a tendency to reflect out of the shield, hit the back wall, and disperse into the congregation without that forward-facing thing. There was a period of time that I actually was using a Marshall, and I think a JC120, so I could have some spanky clean when I needed that. And the Marshall was actually, ironically, kind of, I think I called it the swamp tone. It was almost kind of like an Eric Johnson-y thing, because this was before the Strymon reverb had become the Strymon reverb. But the point being is, by reflecting the amps at the back wall, the sound person and I could have a conversation at the point that the guitar was too loud or too soft, how we could do it and how we could make it work. We found a balance, more or less. The sound tech was it was a begrudging thing, but we got there. So I'm remembering the one Sunday I showed up. Oh, I'm peeking. Stop that. Don't do that. Testing. Test. All right. No, my ums are picking. All right, hold on. Let me pull this back just a little bit here. Okay. So I wonder if I can close that conversation. I can't. Maybe I can. All right. All right. Here we go. So they moved all my stuff. It's like, if you can imagine when you got a JC120 and a Marshall, there's a sea of cables, and I'd been away for a week or two, and I came back and all my stuff had been moved. I was like, thanks. Spent, the next hour frantically setting it up before pre-service rehearsal. The point being is that there are ways that you can incorporate it. Now, here's the thing, is that I totally feel you. And, kind of the version of young Doug there in that situation was this, is that, oh my word, totally blowing up and I can't mute this because I'm on Facebook here, and let's see if I can shut Facebook up over here. Let me just ditch Facebook. Oh my word. Hang on a second. All right, just one second here. Oh, this is so incredibly lame. What I'm concerned about is if I actually turn Facebook off there, because I'm streaming into Facebook here, I'm concerned that it could actually end the stream to Facebook. So I don't really want to go there. So, there we go. You are blowing up my chat. That's a first. Midstream. Okay. Utterly professional. All right. So here's the thing. There are times, and again, it's that we got to march up the hill sometime, and we just have to go, all right, I'm going to throw the guitar in the fire, and I'm just not going to have a say about this. And just kind of go, okay. I totally feel you. So all right. So let me have a better take on that, maybe. How do we fix it? Okay, so let's do this. One is, you may not be able to fix it. That said, you may be able to go to the worship and creative arts director or worship pastor, whatever, and just go, can we meet for coffee? And then just kind of go, look, totally get it. You don't want a 100-watt Marshall back there. You don't want precedent for every guitar player to show up with an amp. But honestly, it allows me to do my job better. And it also makes it for, honestly, if I want to be totally honest, makes a little bit of better experience for me. And, here's the thing. It's not like I'm going to blow out the sound. It's not like it's going to be this or that. And maybe you've already been down this road. But let's just presume the coffee with pastor route, which is like, look, it's not going to blow the sound out. It's a 1-watt amplifier. And I'm going to turn it sideways such that when we're on the platform, that's the other thing is that where people get freaked out is they see that amp facing forward and they're like, no, thou shalt not amplifier. Which on one hand, I can kind of understand. The other thing is that let's deconstruct the whole picture here. Just, let's pull the pieces apart. Because again, and what's the advantage of this? So again, strategy, right? Because sometimes we lead up, Sometimes we lead down and sometimes we lead laterally. There are times that we want to lead up such that we can at least champion our cause. We may not always win, but at least we can do that. So having some strategies around that's going to go, well, let's deconstruct all the reasons for the no. One is that they're thinking I'm just going to have my Jimi Hendrix moment and the headband and the left-handed strat and Star Spangled Banner. It's coming. They don't know what Sunday it's going to be, but one Sunday it's going to happen, and we're going to launch into Star Spangled Banner on the downbeat of the first song. So the idea is like, okay, well, wait a second. We can understand, maybe they think I'm going to play too loud. That's what sound checks are for. Second of all, we don't want to face that thing forward. We can face it. Generally speaking, guitar players are already on the side. When I've used a live amp, I either face it back towards me using power cab, which kind of has a little kickstand thing, or I'll place the amp off to the side, and generally I'll be a couple feet back from where the worship leaders are and their microphones, and I'll have it facing me, generally angled up a little bit, so it's just kind of coming at my ears here. Not a huge amount of volume, not really affecting what's front of house because it's not directionally facing forward. Say my guitar is going to sound better, my playing is going to sound better, I'm going to be able to play the parts better, and this will be it. We understand that the sound tech, wants to make sure it's not too loud. We understand that they want to make sure it sounds good on the live stream. I actually think we can achieve all those things. Can we try it one Sunday? Then what we've done is we've done everything that we can to just kind of go, look, it's going to make for a better experience. Can we try it? And then, that no is a different type of no. And, that's a different thing. And there will be times that no actually happens. And I realize that. Oh, good. I can read those over here now. Good. And that is an interesting thing. Craig, I'm sure I'm going to see age plays a huge factor. You got to massage the older church in slow growth. Interesting strategy. Okay, good. I know it's not the same, but we have considered going with the Helix route or already doing it. Okay, right. Okay, hang on. Let me make sure. There we go. Hold on. Let's get here. There we go. Okay, good. Okay, so Jeffrey, do me a favor. Go ahead and give us a little bit more depth of field here, please, because this is a more than worthy topic that many of us have or will encounter. So, like, this is right at the heart of the matter. Ooh. I'm going to back up a step. Craig's comment: age plays a huge factor. Got to massage the older church into slow growth, and I think that's true. And I think the thing is losing control when you're getting older is just it's just a thing, and it's scary. It's terrifying, honestly. All right, Brett, hey, what's going on, my friend? If a church is going to dictate what a volunteer has to use, the funny thing is, Brett. Let me finish reading your comment. They should also be willing to buy the gear, or at least help out get the gear they desire that's appropriate for the platform. And that's the other thing. So I'm curious, Jeff, what are you using, and kind of how are you getting there? I think that would be great to know. That would be fabulous to know. I would love to know that, and that will be insightful into kind of what you're doing currently. All right, heading over to YouTube here. Okay, Dean, hey, what's going on? All right, one of the difficult things for a congregation is moving beyond about 150. That's the most relationship that can be maintained by a pastor. Oh, wow, we're going deep with this one. Bring it on. Come on. To grow beyond requires a very new take. Wow. Okay, that is great point, Dean. Boy, okay, so let's back up a step and let's unpack everything that is implied there, which arguably there's a huge amount of truth. That is to say, the bottleneck on a congregation growing larger than 150, kind of the average 150 to 200 person, is the capacity of pastoral care for a body that's larger than that. Wow. Okay. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. First of all, I think what ends up happening is when people get married to opinion, and that opinion and being right, because there are times we can be right, but we're so busy being right, we're wrong, right? And I'm not saying that kind of in a relationship to Jeff's comments. I totally feel that. It's just like, look, I just want to do my job here. I want it to sound good. And like, honestly, like, DI guitar, just like, it really, it doesn't sound like, and the other thing is asking questions to say, okay, what are you hearing that a guitar should actually sound like? And what are you envisioning that I'm going to use that's going to get us there? And does that actually sound better? Like, let's do a little bit of scientific work here. Let's A/B the two of these and see which one actually works better. And here's the thing, and I think it's reasonable as a volunteer to just kind of go, hey, you know what? I'm giving my time here. At least allow me to feel heard. Can that work here? And you may not like the answer, so just let me forewarn you this. But just kind of go, can we at least try the two options, and then let's record a little bit of the board mix. We can do both, maybe at a rehearsal or something. But can we try the two of them, and both sides kind of go, let's give it our best to make the other work, and let's see what actually ends up in the framework of worship being the best, or kind of just like, let's at least empirically kind of go A and B. A was this, B was that. At the end of the day, which one seems to serve the greater body the best? Getting back to this 150. Okay, I got permission to say it. So, it's an interesting thing is that there comes a point where learning to raise up the people behind you, know that if you're going to grow to a certain size, you have to replicate. You have to be willing to look around you and go, who are my 12? Or who's my 1? Or who are my 2? And actually, before you get to that point where you're at 150, you're like at 50 kind of going, well, look, all right, Lord, do you want us to be bigger? And if the answer you keep getting is yes, 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 then you ask, well, Lord, guide me, guide us, reveal it to us so we can figure this out. And God will do that, right? So all of a sudden, if you're at 50 and God's going, you're going to be 350, and you just keep hearing it over and over and over and over again, you're kind of going, all right, what do we do? Well, obviously you listen for guidance, but one of the things is you're going to start looking at the word, and it's like, where's the 12? And the great thing about the 12 is that each one brings their own strength, and you want to find that person that can provide pastoral care. Now, I love, that's the most relationship that can be maintained by a pastor as an individual. There is so much there. So there are. Let's unpack this, because there's a lot of meat on that bone. One is there is a need that people feel for that personal touch from the pastor. And that means that they want it, they want it out in the hallway. They want to get the handshake when the COVID thing is done. They want to know that if they've got a family member in the hospital, the pastor's either going to show up, or they're going to get a phone call or an email or a text. They're going to stay in touch. As a church grows, what the pastor has to do to be in charge of doing all the things that they traditionally have to do, that grows. And at a certain point, they have to start letting go of stuff. Not all pastors are good at delegating and raising up. And ultimately, the ones that are masterful at that can grow, in theory, past that ceiling of where I can no longer manage this on my own, as we've done it. But without vision, people shall perish. The idea is you have to lead the congregation through that. And it was funny. I remember being on a ministry trip in Canada, and the pastor was talking to the congregation. It was a church about 75, great congregation, great pastor, and we had a conversation with it after because we were kind of brought in as you know, Melissa and I, my wife and I were there to, I think we were there as part of Guitar Church, which was kind of this guitar ministry, and then we also kind of helped lead worship, and we were talking with the pastor, you know, after the service, and you know, we were talking about vision because I come from, you know, more of a evangelical type of background. So Melissa came up in Hillsong. So the idea of casting vision is really important because you want to onboard people to where it is you're going to take them. Because leadership is about taking people someplace that they can't go on their own in theory. They want you to be able to do that because they're equipped to do what they do. You're equipped to lead. It's the way it works, right? So the thing is that he said, I'm supposed to be telling them about the vision. Not every pastor knows this. And, you know, it's not like out of osmosis, like, you're supposed to cast vision every week. He was like, I didn't know. And so some of these folks are just doing the best that they can do with the best that they can do. And so in realizing that, you kind of begin to go, what are the inhibiting factors here? Sometimes there, and this is the other thing is that in theory, not only is the pastor, you know, not able to grow the church because they're trying to do all those things. And honestly, quite often the motivation is they just want to provide the same quality of care for people that they always have. And as an end result, the congregation actually can't grow when it naturally wants to. They're not able to do the job. And ultimately, it's one of three things. It's the wrong person for that season of the church, which is an interesting thing. That congregation maybe really isn't intended to grow any larger, even though it's giving growth signs, or there just needs to be a shift in the leadership where you kind of go, okay, how do we figure this thing out? And that thing is really where, you know, the vision kind of comes and goes, look, we're growing faster. And this is where pastor being honest, I think actually, I'm not saying pastors are dishonest, I'm actually saying, you know, I'm used to leading a smaller congregation. We're going to have some time to figure this out because guess what? We're growing. But guess what? We're growing. It means some of the things are going to look a little different than they've looked in the past. And it means I'm not going to be able to do all the things that I was able to do, but it means that we're going to have a greater impact on our community. I think we all want that, right? And everybody kind of goes that. And that's the thing of a pastor, you know, leading down in the same way that sometimes we have to lead up with the conversations we engage people with. That's a great point. I could rabbit trail on that all night. But, and then we go. It requires a very new take. And that's where number 3 is. We're going to we need to do something new, or else we're not going to figure out how to shoulder this, right? And that's the unfortunate part. Is I've been at a church where the growing signs happened, and the leadership was unable to really kind of manifest what it needed to do to handle that growth. It's unfortunate to see that happen. It's kind of heartbreaking. Matthew, I'm laughing with you, not at you. We should be equipping the flock to grow the church, not trying to grow with the best band or the funniest pastor. You know, it's an interesting thing. I mean, you know, there are going to be funny pastors, and that works in some places, right? I know your heart. I'm just believing I know your heart, but I do know your heart. And it is not about the best band, and it is about equipping the saints, and it is about those things. It's, you know, again, the kind of the topic point here is, it's really easy to look at Stephen Furtick, you know, telling engaging stories and all of that and go, well, maybe we should do more of that. And the other thing is like, you know, let's make an analogy. And it's funny you made of the band. Pastors have their influences too, just like worship leaders and the people rostering their songs. Like, I love where Bethel is at. We're only doing Bethel from now on, you know, or whatever worship team, you know, All Sons and Daughters, Hillsong, you know, Miel San Marcos, whoever it is that is really speaking to you, it's easy to go, this is speaking to me so much, as opposed to kind of going, well, what's going to speak to the new person coming in the door who knows nothing about this? What's going to speak to the old person that is in the back with the cotton in their ears going like this, going, this is misery. And how are we going to take everybody there? I will say this. The one easy answer is we break out the cajon, we break out the acoustic electric bass, we break out the acoustic guitars, and we play new songs and old songs alike acoustically at a reasonable volume. And everybody is generally going to be pretty happy because it means we have great worship. We mix in some old, we mix in some new. We can have great vocals. The vocalists aren't blasting their vocal cords out because we're not doing the Jimi Hendrix thing with the double 100-watt Marshall stacks. I mean, it's a way that you can get there. The other thing about acoustic worship, and the biggest cajon fan in the world, is that it's very intimate. And so one of the things that at one of my old churches, we did this thing where it was a midweek worship, I think, and I think we did a thing where the last Sunday of the month was just an acoustic thing, because what it allowed you to do also was to have some ebb and flow. And so one of the things we brought in some fairy lights, and there were these candles that we would light. It was this really intimate experience. And the interesting thing is that it's a fascinating thing. Is that if you can give people, and again, this was a spirit-filled church, so not all churches are. I get it. All sorts of whatever your thing is, or whatever God is doing in your church, awesome. For this particular church, what was needed was people really got a chance to experience the Holy Spirit in a non-video flashing, non-flashing lights, no LED wall. There was an LED wall, but I don't even remember if it was on during those services, because the idea was this intimate moment of worship. And I loved that because you really felt this intimacy. And if you could find other ways to give people an intimate experience in worship, that maybe the church has grown beyond the 150, where you're kind of going, we're going to try and figure out how we can give people that sense of intimacy with God, where we may not be able to have the pastor invite everybody over for turkey dinner, right? I love that. There we go. Claw dog. Now we know why you call it claw dog. Growth is the goal, but without a solid base on the rock, thank you, growth can bring destruction. And that's the thing, is like, we want to have. Here's the thing. Ambition. Oh, I actually use the A word. Church ambition. I'm actually going to use the two words together. Is a dangerous thing. And destruction, you use the D word. So, we have to be careful, not just what we're wishing for, but why, right? As we really examine our heart. Because, I think we all want to be relevant in our city. We all want to feel we're making a difference. And I think a lot of us would agree, if we were really, really honest, we would feel, well, we need to see, growth in size to feel that that's actually happening. That is not an accurate metric. I think really, ultimately, is if we've got our 100 people that are watching the service, and that service is amazing, and those people are being fed, and those people are feeling known, and those people feeling they're having an intimate moment in worship where God's really able to speak to them above and beyond the lights and the projection. That, I think, again, big church, little church. I don't have a problem with big church. I love the Hillsong folks. If I were in Sydney, I'd be going up to, Hillsong, most likely. But again, look at the generations that Hillsong has produced. I cannot, off the top of my head, think of a church movement. That was one of the other phrases that I actually, that I pulled down out of this conversation. Movement. So when we think of a church movement, at least I do, I traditionally think of a church that their worship blew up, because again, being a worship guitar player, I see things through the worship colored lenses. The worship blew up and that church movement became a thing. Well, wrong. Church movement is about the movement of God. It's not about the movement of the flippin' church. And we get so caught up in seeing the blah, blah, blah church movement that it becomes about the church and not the movement of God. And it's a logical thing for us to kind of miss in our humanness, right? We see this church blow up, but it's like, without God, it doesn't matter. It's God that's moving, and it may be moving through them, but that whole church movement thing, I was like, whoa, I gotta write this down. Yes and amen. Hang on, let me jump over here, Ski, to the gram of Insta. Oh, there we go. Melissa Doppler always has something great. All right, hang on a second. All right, Jeffrey. Hey, thanks for jumping back in. When I play electric in church, it's an Eastman AR 580 CE archtop, lovely guitar. I also use a Martin 0028. Oh boy. I plug straight into a direct box. That's fine with the Martin, but with the Jazz box, I would like to have some control. No Hendrix. Maybe some Lee Ritenour. I'll take that. Uh, uh, there you go. Maybe there we go. We play Bethel and Hillsong, and I'm not a pro rocker in worship. I seek to contribute where the anointing is evident, and God is free to move hearts for His purpose. So here is another way to approach this, Jeffrey. It is entirely possible, just saying, that your sound tech is completely unaware of actually what the guitar actually sounds like in Hillsong and Bethel. And so, this is where the dialogue, where, starting potentially with the coffee with the worship pastor / worship, whatever, leader. And then potentially inviting the sound tech into the conversation, just going, look, I have an investment on my gear. Let's pull up multi-tracks, and I want you to hear what the Bethel guitar track actually sounds like. Now I want you to hear what Hillsong. This is my archtop. This is what this sounds like. For us to get into the zone of what you're wanting people to hear, that's going to be synonymous with what they're already listening to on Spotify and iTunes and in their car, this is not going to get us there. And with all the moves you got to do in video and all of that, I can't really imagine you running a separate delay time and changing the BPM for every song that we're working on, and changing the reverb size for the different songs. I understand the concerns about volume, but we're not going to, this is not, just listen to that. How does it work out? And find a less emotional way, because that was me showing emotion. I'm not saying not to show emotion, but I think there are better ways to manage one's emotions. Just go, look, here's what this record sounds like. I can't imitate that sound like that. Do you want me to, play Autumn Leaves? Because that, that's the sound this is. Bring along Autumn Leaves. This is the sound of my, bring your iPhone and make a little playlist. And you're like, here's Autumn Leaves. Here's the sound of my archtop. And then here's Bethel. All right. I can't use the sound of Autumn Leaves to play Bethel. I need a little delay and reverb here, folks. Work with me. I'm just trying to do my job. Let me bring the tools to do this. And by the way, take a look at the 10 churches within a 10-mile, 20-mile, 100-mile radius and see how many of them are not having any effect with the guitar player. It's the norm. Can we try it? There's got to be a way to gently reach out and just say, let's try it. Can we do that, please? And if the answer is no, well, then that's a different conversation. Come back and we'll talk about that. That's there's got to be a way to find that path, right? All right. Keep me posted, please. Steve McFarland. Hey, Steve, what's going on? Thanks again for your message. That was lovely. I think that another reason for the difficulty in the small church to be mid-sized church transition in the small to mid-sized church transition is that the small church tends to attract people who have who like to have the direct attention from the pastor and aren't interested in relegated to an associate pastor. Christians are just as carrot as the general population. This is again where the leadership comes, right? And you're absolutely correct. But this is one of the reasons why I love Growth Track, is that it is designed to be a vehicle to help churches. Hey, Jim, what's going on, my man? Good to see you. Growth Track is designed to be a vehicle to help churches transition in discipleship and build leadership rungs of a ladder that allows them to reach new height. And so the great thing about Growth Track, and my buddy Chris Griffin, who's been on the show here before, is basically the worship creative arts director at Church of the Highlands, which is where Growth Track came from. They've got 30 some odd campuses. They're an amazing church. And so the thing is what they've found the vehicle to do is find where your serving sweet spot is, and that your relationships are built in that serving team and community of common interest. In many ways, honestly, pastor doesn't want to talk to me about, how do I convince my wife that I really need a $3,500 cologne? I don't want the $5,000 one. I can get the one without the horsey. Like I don't need the extra $1,500 horsey. I just want the cologne without the horsey. $3,500 cologne. Now you guys are probably looking at me like Doppler is daft, but the rest of you are chuckling because you're like, I know exactly what he's talking about. Do you think your average pastor can actually walk you through why why and how you're going to be able to convince your wife that you need the $3,500 cologne? Just say it. So the point being is that horsey or no horsey, they're going to be like, you're mad, as opposed to like, well, walk us through this. Can't you get the kind of the whatever's the KR or the CR, the reissue one I've got over there? The point being is that ultimately, and Kim Walker-Smith said this, I interviewed her. I don't do most of the interviews anymore. That has, again, I would love to for my own ego, love to be the person interviewing all these famous worship people. But you know what? We got somebody that's better at it than I am. And I went, own it. Let it go. And I don't have the responsibility of having to corral people in their schedule. Not that Kim needed corralling. Lock them down, get them to show up, do this, do that. It's great, but honestly, we got a guy that's been doing it a lot longer and is a lot better at it. Let him own it. So the point being is walking people through that process, having a process like, growth track that enables you to on-ramp people into not serving positions so they can be voluntold, but so they can actually use their gifts in the framework of church and in those relationships that are built in those serving communities where there are like interests. Somebody that's serving with me on the worship team can kind of go, so wait a second, you need a $3,500 pedal? Explain this to me. Like you could buy like a car. Why don't you use that to buy like your wife like a couple pairs of shoes or something? Go on a vacation. Explain to me, what makes this, I need to understand this. Like at least somebody on the worship team can kind of go, yeah, that clown, man, I really, I totally feel you, man. The point being somebody that has some depth of field with that. And ultimately training people is like, it's really nice to have the pastor, have that personal relationship. But honestly, there are people that need that relationship more than you do. And leading people through that. And that ultimately comes down to, how do I say it? So it's ultimately the leader's capacity to lead a group into becoming a larger group. And there are multiple sides to that. And again, you're totally right. And we do want that personal touch, and we don't like to see, because the other part of it is as a community grows, you see that person looks like the favorite person, and you get jealous. And that's a matter of leading people through that and just kind of go, you may see me having lunch with the new people. Just in the same way I had lunch with you, we want to be growing the fruit of the vine here. We need to be doing a better job. And that means that I may need to spend less time, and your community group becomes an important thing. Your life group, your serving group, all those things we're going to need to grow together to grow together. But leading people in unity, and you're kind of like, we're on the unity path. We're leading towards miracles, and that means that we all have to give up a little bit. And that's also the pastor being able to kind of go, you know what, I'm going to miss being able to have, these closer relationships with everybody. I need that, but you know what? God isn't as interested in what I need. He's more interested in what He needs, and that is leading people through that thing, and that is a really important part of this process. Jim, I love you, bro. I missed a lot. You already have a lot. And I love this topic. What are some key points so far in this topic? Melissa, can you do me a favor? And just give him a couple of bullets, and then I will illuminate further. Jem, I'm not going to leave you out here, so just give me just a moment. Oh my word. Boy, my. Hold on. Let's do this. Here we go. All right, there we go. All right, good. Yep. I've changed my keyboard setup, and it's mayhem over here. Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. Come on. There we go. Oh, a troublemaker appears. So, Jim, just to answer your question, we're talking about. I will. First of all, you know what? My apologies, Jim. I know that Mel's in the thread and she can do it in a more eloquent way than I was, but I'm happy to hit the pause button. So, here's the thing. What we're talking about is this concept of smaller churches and larger churches. It's really easy being at a smaller church, kind of going, they have all this resource, they've got this giant LED thing, all this is happening. But there's an intimacy sometimes that we experience as a smaller church that maybe God just wants our church to be a smaller church to have this great intimate experience. And we're so busy looking at Stephen Furtick's 5 million views that he got yesterday on when it's Monday. We're like, we sometimes see that and mistake that for the impact that we're supposed to be having in our community. There's a whole series of things like, at a smaller church, we have volunteers who don't necessarily know that as opposed to running a archtop, oh gosh, the brand of that guitar. Hang on, it's in the thread here. I can scroll. Gosh darn it. Where is that lovely archtop? Come on. There we go, an Eastman archtop. Instead of having an Eastman archtop, which, it's a great sounding guitar, but that is on its own is a lot more suited for autumn leaves and some blues than it is for getting the Bethel or the Hillsong sound. So, and no amplifier, and just like an archtop direct is not really going to get us there. And having a volunteer whose claws are so tethered to the mixing console they will not let it go, and they won't raise up somebody behind them either, by the way, that we have. And the interesting thing is okay, I got permission. We can have a small-mindedness. Now, here's the thing. I love words because small-mindedness is typically not a good thing. But if as a church we decide that we're going to be small-minded and we're going to redefine what small-minded is, which means we're going to be the best small church that we possibly can. We're going to purposely be small-minded. We're not trying to be Bethel or Hillsong or, Stephen Furtick or whatever. We just want to serve the people that we meet. And if we get 100 views on YouTube, we celebrate everyone. We pray for every one of those people. And we're like, you know what? If we don't go above 150 views or 120 or 101 views, we're going to praise God for the 100 views that we got and just go, you know what? We were small-minded and we won. And that was kind of the thing. What is our wins? Those are the metrics we want to be counting. Okay. And there's nothing that replaces the sound of a breathing amp that reacts in the room. Dean Anderson, spoken like a true guitar player. It's a funny thing. Is I'm going to agree and disagree simultaneously. And again, we will have a difference of opinion, but a healthy one, I believe. So interestingly enough, behind me, you see two of my favorite little amplifiers. Those are both the Tone Master Deluxe Reverbs, the less new and the newer one. Both of them have in standby mode, they basically, the amp does all the things that it does, but without the speaker on, and it passes the signal out through the XLR outs on the back. And on this one, you can choose a Sennheiser 421 or a 57 or no IR. And this one, it's a Royal 121 or an SM57. The amps, other than that, and this one's got, I think that one's got an Eminence. This one has a Celestion, Neo Creamback. So the point being is they are a little bit different in terms of the speaker. That makes this one a little bit more expensive. Ideally, if I were going direct out, I'd use two of them, hence why there's two of them back there. And I use the 121 on one side and the 57 on the other, and that would be like, woohoo! You'd be in the sweet spot. So what's happened is the emulations, and the other thing is that my friends at Boss have created this AIRD, and I'm going to forget, but basically augmented IR development or something like that. Basically what they've done, like they're kind of figuring out, and I don't know how they're doing it, honestly. And here's the thing, I love a tube amp, so I mean, like, over this shoulder, you've got, hold on, let's see, there we go. Still haven't figured this thing out like that. There's nothing like plugging into that thing. The experience is a different experience. But the interesting thing is that this whole modeling and IR thing has gotten so good and the benefits have gotten so beneficial that kind of like at this point I'm kind of like, and I've been in the modeling thing, like I was using HT 500, back there simply because it was so easy, and I can here's the thing, and I will say that, Dean, again, I'm not being disagreeable. I'm riffing on this concept because honestly, I love a great tube amp. The problem is that in most scenarios that I've been in, now okay, let's back up a step. I was at a really big church, mega church. The sound tech, Chris, who I absolutely adored, he knew how much care and consideration I put into preparing my parts. He knew the hours of time I invested. So it was a large church. There was a space back behind the big curtain in the back. I could have my amps. They were kind of sequestered back there. We used the Radial SGI. And I could bring my amps, and he would take all the time in the world to set the mics. We would move them a little bit. He really worked with me to do that. The sound was awesome. I mean, let's face it. You're totally right. Like, if you can run tube amps, there's nothing like them. They live, they breathe, they create sound. I couldn't hear them. They were far enough away the guitar couldn't hear them. But when it's coming through the PA, there's something that happens where that tube amp hears itself coming back. It's magic. No denying it. I won't try to deny it. That said, I also, I love playing direct simply because in a situation where I don't have a Chris Pedro, I would much rather have the control via what I know it sounds like going direct than being at the whim of some sound tech who's like, I think the guitar is too bassy. I will turn the treble all the way up at 4K. Or whatever it is, it's like, we need more ice pick on the guitar. The point being is that my idea of what the guitar sounds like in your average worship, and I hate to beat up on these poor people because they're just volunteering, doing the best that they can, right? But my idea of what a guitar should sound like and their idea of what a guitar should sound like is probably markedly different. With a modeling device, I can at least kind of make it so that they can't really get it that wrong. All they can either do is make it too loud or too quiet, and hopefully they're not going to start trying to EQ some modeling device. I totally feel you. If you look at the Hillsongs and the Bethels, at the end of the day, they're using tube amps. So I would be leading you down the proverbial garden path to say, nobody uses that stuff anymore. That would be hockey puck. No hockey puck in here. And yes, nothing replaces the sound of a living, breathing amp in the room. Agreed. All right. Okay. I'll take that bait, and then we'll jump back over. And Jem, if you got any questions there, the whole point about this is we want people's feedback, questions, and hot topics. We want. Hello, Pedro. Good to see you. We want everybody, just kind of like, throw me the burning hot potatoes. I'll do my best to catch them, because here's the thing: what we want to do is actually have, hopefully a community where we can kind of come together and go, look, I sometimes can't ask these questions at church. How can we figure this out, right? All right, Brad, what's going on? Look at that Strat. Boy, look at that body. That's lovely. Ooh. Wait a second, it's not a Telecaster. Hey, there are times when it feels like worship is about the performance. Too many of the new songs are great to listen to or play, but don't translate or engage personal worship. So this is an interesting thing. This is, let's call it, we're going to coin a phrase, the our God factor. There are certain songs that, like, regardless of whether we've done it about 5 million times, it allows people to really enter in. And, it's an interesting thing, and I really don't think that these teams are really trying to have a performance mentality. I think that there is, when you have a mega church, I think there are pressures, internal and external, I don't know which because I'm not in a mega church, where having the impact that some of the other churches that are mega church size is kind of built into the peer thing, right? We want to do how do I say this? We often look at our peers to kind of go, are we having the success and the impact that we should. That is a healthy way to look at things, kind of going, if we're at this size, we're similarly yoked, are we actually, having the impact that we are? Now, that said, we don't know what the internal dialogue is there. There are times that we hear some of these songs and they sound a little formulaic, and the reality is when Bethel hit, or actually I should say when Jesus Culture hit, and I've told this story a bunch of times, and I'll go back to KWS, Kim Walker-Smith. I remember walking through the front door and Melissa had them playing, and I was like, I heard Kim Walker-Smith, and she hit me like a ton of bricks coming through the door. I'm like, the anointing was so heavy, and the music was so amazing, but it was the anointing on it, right? That's what you're talking about. That I was like, who is that? Right? I was just like, oh, and that was an interesting thing. So, here's what I'm going to say about this. Go back to the Hillsong example. 3 generations deep. You have to be able to replicate that to maintain it. Hillsong's figured that out. I love Young and Free. One of the few interviews I did recently was Aiden King, and that DNA passed down through the generations, and it was missional about we're going to pick the people that we're going to pour into. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. And so it wasn't. And if you listen to Young and Free, there's a spirit that's on that music that you can go back to United, you can go back to Hillsong Worship and kind of go. But it's not quote unquote the Hillsong sound. There's something in the DNA about their revelation about who God is and how that gets interpreted into music that's a heart thing, right? So, Brad, I think we have to find that way of kind of going, what's the call of our church, right? And it's really hard as a musician, especially as a mainstream musician that comes into a worship team and goes, oh, we're going to do this, the sorts of things I aspired for in a mainstream thing, we're going to aspire for in a worship thing. It's totally understandable. But it takes a very unique type of leadership to actually kind of go, hey, if we're called to just lead worship for 100 people, just make the best 100-person worship you possibly can, right? I think these are, again, this is the challenge of the quote unquote, small churches. Sometimes it's, again, being small-minded. I love that. Sorry, I'm enamored with it, but the idea is like, well, how do we be the best small church we possibly can be? We don't have any aspirations to be anything other than what God has us being right now. So what does that look like? How do we bring the best version of this? We don't need a click. We're not playing with tracks, or maybe we are. I don't care. But we're just doing what we do. What songs? We got somebody in the back of the congregation taking a look and going, which songs light up the congregation? Which songs have people in tears? Which songs have people coming up to the front to give their lives, at the end of the worship set, right? Those are the metrics we want to be looking for. And sometimes we just get so caught up in PCO and our run sheet. And I get it. I've been there a little too well. But we miss all that other stuff going on. Great point. Brad, if that's your guitar, lovely Strat. I love that grain and that finish. Whew. All right. Part 2. Here we go. There are advantages of both large and small churches. The goal should be serving outside the walls. So here's what gifts were given. I will agree and disagree a little bit with that for a couple of reasons. I want to be very careful how I say this. I think there are churches that are called to do different things. I think it is hugely important that a church that is positioned to be a church that God is calling to serve outside their 4 walls, that they realize what that call looks like and is active towards that. And that means you can be a small church and do big things in your community, right? Be the hands and feet of Jesus with the widows and the orphans and all of those things. Yes, yes, and yes. The thing that comes to mind is I've been in enough churches where there are people that their personal brand of worship is service, and they project that onto their church, and it becomes a stinking hot mess because when those folks, quote unquote, dig their feet in, we're not doing enough missions, we're not doing enough missions, we're not doing enough missions, it just gets divisive as opposed to going, actually, pastor's heard that's not what he's hearing that the church is called for. I found that more than guitar players who feel the need to like just give me an amplifier and a delay and I'll be happy. The folks that their personal thing is measured by missions and how much missions are, it gets really uncomfortable and slightly unpleasant really quickly. Now, I just need to say that because that's part of that dynamic, whether we like it or not, right? Now, that is separate from the fact, like, what are we doing about, shut-ins during COVID, the elderly? I mean, there's never been a better time than now as a church to be present in our community, right? Instead of, arguably, I'll go so far as to say this, arguably instead of, streaming our service on Sunday, and just saying, would our time, energy, and investment of energy and money be better spent going, how do we actually meet, on Zoom the other 6 days, have, put up a video on Sunday, and then we're out delivering food to these people, right? Like the people that don't have anybody to bring them food. We got our gloves, we got our masks, we're doing all these things. So I'm with you. Like, you can hear my my heart for that. But we want to make sure that we're doing what we're called to do, right? And we want to be doing it again in unity. It's a great point. It's a great point. So again, I've just seen kind of some of the extreme, like, we're not doing enough missions. And it's just like, we got 5 people in the church. We can barely do worship. It sometimes gets a little extreme, and it's kind of like, I want more. I don't know. Sometimes people just get a little. Woohoo. All right, hang on. Let me jump over to the Book of Face here real quick, and I will come back. Chris, I see you over there. Or a new couch. Oh no, she's back. She must have heard the thing about the Klon. Oh no, I'm totally busted now. Okay. Hang on a second. Jem, I hope I answered your question well. Love you, bro. Brett, I'm in a smaller church in a region full of mostly the same. Love it. I don't think the big churches project themselves on smaller churches, but rather the little churches seem to try and create a culture where the big church is the standard. Oh, you think. In doing so, they lose their corporate identity of the community where they're located. Wow. Oh, stinging. Our church had to learn to be comfortable being who we are, and not trying to be something we are not or will ever be. Woohoo! You think. Our location is rural, in an area not densely populated. We're never going to be a 1,000-person church. We can be bigger than we are, but we released ourselves from unreasonable expectations. Boy, and that again is like, small-minded or medium-minded, just kind of going, wait a second, and this is the thing. It's like it's kind of the heart of this thing. Is it's very easy to look at the Stephen Furticks and go, look at all of that. We want the experience, because here's the thing: is we see. Okay, so again, getting back to this church movement, we see God moving through large church movements, and we want the movement of God. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That if there's ever a type of jealousy, let's use the phrase, and I'm somebody's going to probably rib me for it, and appropriately so. Let's call it righteous jealousy. Okay, it's not right to be jealous, and it's not truly righteous. But the point being is, we want what they have because we're like, gosh, we just really want to be impacting our community the way that they are. Now, that said, and again, let's take any of the churches I mentioned by name and take them out of the conversation. Is it true that the mega churches are really impacting their community as much as we think, or are we just seeing the videotape service where everything is big? It's just like, it's one of the things people complain about. This is as close as I'm going to get to this about the news, where they zoom in enough with the camera, And, it completely changes the relationship of what's really going on. All right. And so and I remember shooting social media for our church. I would only shoot, with my iPhone or whatever it was that I was shooting at the time, close in enough such that there was never a photo of an empty seat. Come on. Any of you who have shot for your church shooting social media, you know what I'm talking about. We can't have any empty seats shown, right? So the point being is I'm just as guilty of it. So like it's not as if I'm like somehow immune of this. We want it to seem like someplace you want it to be. Now, our heart is we want to see people transformed in the likeness of Jesus. I get that. But are we really okay showing empty seats? If we're really okay with where we are, we should be okay with showing the place is half full. It's not half empty. It's half full. And we're celebrating that. Now, ideally, I can understand all the reasons why you want to zoom in a little bit. I get that. It's being a little bit judicious because we do know that people are tire kicking these days, especially now, virtually. But at the same time, I am, for one, guilty of I'm not shooting that. There's empty chairs in there. Or when I'm in Photoshop, I'm cropping the empty chairs in there, right? I'm cropping them out. I've been there. And you're totally right, Brett. It's so easy to just... And it's an innocent thing that we get pulled in. We want to impact our community, but sometimes we actually... This is the irony, is that those things that we would chase are actually the things that get in the way of our impacting the community. We're so busy with the LED wall and the new PA and the new board and the latest fill in the blank pedal. I'm not going to say their name. That instead we're just kind of going, you know what? If we didn't buy one new piece of gear this year, and all we did was kind of figure out how we'd spend a little bit more time in prayer together, how we might spend a little bit more time in rehearsal together, and how we might spend a little bit more time in each other's lives away from church. What happens? What do we bring to the worship platform then? And what happens to the lives of the people that are in our congregation today, a year from now? Like that, and then maybe I'm a media person, so you shoot a video. What are you battling with today? Where are you at? 365 degrees later, interview the same people, see where they're at. Just kind of go, did what we're doing actually make a difference in their lives? Can we actually kind of go, yeah, this is what I was battling with. I've been in my small group. People were praying for me. People were praying for me that I didn't know were praying for me. People that didn't even like me were praying for me. And guess what? They're now my best friend, because we came together and we found unity together, right? Let's face it, I'll say it, you're not going to like everybody you're going to meet in church, but that doesn't mean you're not supposed to not get along with them. Hang on a second here. Let's see what we got over here. There we go. Chris, I love your questions. What equipment is supplied by the church and what is expected to be supplied by the artists? I don't even think I've ever heard you mention this. That is a really good question. In days past, it was very common for a guitar player at a church to have an HD 500 supplied by the church, and basically the church would... Here's the other version of this conversation. All right, forget that, you've got your arch top. You're going to show up with whatever guitar, and you're going to play through this pedal board, and these are the sounds you're going to use. All right, go for it. Like, you have no control. And here's the thing. I'm down with, if that's what you want us to do for consistency, I'm in. I'm generally, as long as it's not totally lame, I'm kind of like, if those are the rules, I'm going to learn to like this. I'm going to find a way to try and if I can make it work, if I can make it work versus not making it work, I'm going to try and make it work. If I'm in a position where I can't change kind of what the parameters are, right? So nowadays, there are churches that actually, Church of the Highlands has 2 Kempers at every campus. I think they may also have some Iridiums now. So basically, you bring your pedal board and you plug into that. But the point being is that different churches have that, and others are just like bring whatever you got. Same thing, the analogy, and we had this conversation, I think last time about, or maybe not. Where was that? I think it was last week, about drummers showing up with their snare drums and their cymbals and their pedals. Like if I'm a sound tech and okay, so I'm going to play the devil's advocate right now. I'm the church sound tech. You ready? Drummer, you're not bringing your snare drum. You're not bringing your cymbals. You want to bring your pedal? Have at it. This is the snare drum that we use. So I said, I'm not spending 15 minutes EQing and gating your snare drum because, here we go, I'm going to go that guy. You want to have your little snare drum. Keep your flipping snare drum at home. Shut up and play the drums, and you're too loud. Go sit down back there in the fishbowl. You didn't see that coming now, did you? All right, so there is a guitar player version of that, which is like, I'm bringing my Marshall, and mind you, I'm that guy. I'm bringing my Marshall half stack, and I'm bringing a JC120. I'm going to face them against the back wall. Now, I did manage to negotiate that with the sound team and everybody, and it sounded great, by the way. But the drummer is the most, forget the guitar amps. I mean, kick that sound guy in the shin and just kind of go, it's not the guitar that's too loud. It's not the arch top. Oi! It's the guy back there hitting things with sticks. Can't you hear that snare? Here's the other thing, though. Is 9 times out of 10, we had this conversation where I was like, yeah, I bet that your sound tech is a drummer. And they were like, how'd you know? Like, for whatever reasons, like, I can't say that. But I thought somebody knows what I was thinking. So, a lot of sound techs are drummers. It just kind of works out that way. And for whatever reason, they think the snare drum, you have to hear every ghost note that could possibly be played, which means the main attack on 2 and 4 is so deafeningly flipping loud that it just basically obliterates anything in its path, including any diction with the vocals. It's an insane thing. Like forget the guitar. The snare drum is the number one offender, and nobody's complaining about that. I flippin' don't get it. I just don't. But I guess God is working that out in me, isn't he? The point being, look at this. What a great example I am. The point being is that we're all supposed to kind of like, just kind of like, if I were a drummer, I'd be like, hey, I spent like $2,000 on the snare, almost as much as the cloth Doug wants to buy, but you're telling me I can't use it. And we're like, actually, no, let me lead you through this. The reason we don't want you playing your snare is that you're a professional drummer who knows how to play the level of the room. Unlike some of the other folks who snare is twice as loud as yours, and they play 3 times harder than you do, and every time they play, I've got to re-EQ the whole drum kit because it's bleeding into the overheads. It's bleeding into the tom mics. It's everywhere. We want to actually spend our time rehearsing the worship team instead of EQing your snare drum, or more importantly, the other drummers that come in. It's just the way it works here works better. That's kind of how we do it. Can you get on board with that and be okay with that? And that happens, by the way, before they ever audition. That's leadership. Because you understand that the drummer actually really just wants to, just like we want to use our amp, it's leading people through the entire journey. And that's not easy to do. Yeah. So to answer your question, quite often, so the neat thing about the church that I was at, they actually had basically wired IEMs that would then hook into a wireless pack. So they would provide you with the IEMs. They were Sures. They were nice. They weren't cheap. And then they had just replaceable ends, buds, I guess, or whatever they are. So you had a little pack that had the name of your buds on there in case you wanted to reuse them. You could, so you didn't waste money on that. And that was really efficient. So generally speaking, if you're on the click, there'll be a personal mixer that everybody kind of has when they dial up their mix, generally speaking. You're generally expected to have your own in-ears. You're generally expected to have all your own gear. But there are churches that will, once they get to a certain level of resourcing, will have something like the Kempers or the Iridiums, such that that way you can just kind of have a great amp sound there, virtual it may be, but then you just plug your pedals into that like that. That is kind of the general range of it. It's a great question. So thank you for bringing that. Well done, Chris. Always a pleasure. Okay, let's see. I think I saw Melissa Doppler over here. Hang on a second. She's always got something. Replying to Brett. Melissa Doppler, I 100% agree with that, but sometimes folks blame it on the big church. It's mostly the way you describe. Good position. God positions us to serve, and reach the community we are in. It's great to take the good stuff that works and leave the rest on the table. Tell me about it. Good to hear, Brett. Makes my heart glad that your church is following the path that God has for it. Amen. Or a new couch. Now, she's talking about she's talking about that Klon. See, and what's great about this is these shows. I'm like, see, I'm not quite as crafty as I think I am, but I'm like, oh, she's upstairs. I can talk about the Klon. Like, what she doesn't know is like for the, so I saw that YouTube video. It's like, right, is the Klon really worth it? I'm like, let's see, is it? Oh boy, but I'll make a YouTube video about it. Of course, that's the logic. All right, hang on a second. Let's see here, Ski. There we go. That's a great question, Chris. I've been and that's also I didn't even mention the youth team. Right, I recall going to play at a youth weekend event where the band took greater than $20,000 years ago, paid for their food and housing costs, and played for $0. So the interesting thing about the youth team. So again, that's a great example of like, let's prevent the disaster before it happens. We're going to know the exact amp, the exact drum kit. We know the drummer's going to play too loud for the room. That's part of what makes it, youthy. And at least you can control some of that stuff. And, that's yeah. I'm only going to take so much of that bait, but that is well stated, Dean. Thank you for that. It can be a very different economy, but we know that going in. Absolutely, which is great. And, it is going to vary. Different churches have different takes on it. Again, Church of the Highlands is a highly resourced church. The idea of, and they're, back up a step. Okay. Couple of things I want to leave you with. Oh my word, 742. I love it. Small-minded. Being big-minded. Let's also say conversely, big-minded can have a multiple views. We don't want to be called to be a small church and be big-minded in this new interpretation of it. In turn, there are times that we really want to be small-minded. But the other thing is I want you guys thinking about, and most importantly, it's not 3, that's actually a W, which is why. I think one of the things we really fail to do a lot, and I will speak for myself, and it's one of the things as I've gotten older and become a more mature Christian and a more mature leader, as I begin to try and ask, well, why don't they want me to plug my arch top into an amp? And they want us to sound like Hillsong and Bethel. Most of the time, it's because they don't actually understand what the guitar actually sounds like in Hillsong and Bethel. And you kind of go, well, this is what my guitar sounds like. Now take a listen to this solo track on that. Just like, how are we going to go from there to there? Explain that to me. Because the guitar is kind of like, it's kind of part of what's going on here. And sometimes they go like, I didn't know. And we can do that in a way without shaming people. Like, I have enough knowledge that if I want to, I can make somebody feel bad about what they don't know. But instead, I'd much rather take people on a journey where I'm helping increase what they do know, right? Or more importantly, sometimes I'm just revealing some of the things that they knew that they didn't know that they knew, right? Kind of like, that's kind of the why thing. Most of us could answer that question pretty easily. Why do they think, well, maybe they actually don't know what it sounds like. Maybe they had a bad experience with a guitar player that was too loud. Maybe they don't like guitar because they're a drummer. And so their idea of guitar is like it's not up in the mix. So, the point being is there's usually a range of reasons, some of which we'll like and some of which we won't, and some of which will be like, didn't see that coming. Or I hadn't even thought about that, right? So that's what's great about why. Why is an incredibly powerful question. Yes, economy, different economy. The economy of why. Chris Alexander. So the funny thing is that over there is a so Chris being a guitar player, he stated the other point is like, that direct thing's pretty convenient. This little whether it's this or HX Stomp, it's like it's awfully convenient. I've got an AC30 over there. I could have put up a trivia thing. What amplifier is so heavy they actually put 3 handles? So now it's not W. Actually, that could be W, but it's also 3. My AC30 has 3 handles on it. it's so heavy that you actually kind of like, if you're going to carry it this way or carry, I mean, it's just like that thing. It should come with a chiropractor's card when you buy that amplifier, because you're going to probably need one trying to maneuver that thing in and out of your backseat. That thing is insane. Chris, you have no idea. Oh, my word. And here's the thing, is that I love your point there, Clawdog 81. So the thing is that we want to, and this kind of gets back to Jeff's comment. It's just like, look, I really want to bring the things that I can bring, which means not only am I bringing this instrument that I've invested some money. Eastman guitars are beautiful, but I also want to be able to bring a sound that's complementary to the style. We're not, again, and I'm sorry I keep using autumn leaves, or we're not playing blues. We are playing worship, which means like there's some delay, there's some reverb, there's a drive pedal happening somewhere in the midst of all this. Like, this is the sound. I'm being robbed of the tools to make the sound, and somehow I'm supposed to, let's just add ego into the equation. So let's just imagine, like, I don't know, let's say Doug Doppler shows up at your worship service, and I'm looking at you up there with the Eastman, and I'm kind of going, so they got the jazz guy this week? And you're like, you have no idea, you moron. Right? So like all of that, like, and you're just trying to be worshipful up here, and it's like, it just doesn't sound right, and it doesn't feel right, and it's just like, I don't know, and I would find some way of making it work, but that would be, honestly, let's be really honest, that would be hard. It would be hard. It would be hard. I feel for you. And the gear is part of your service, so the thing, but it is different from church to church, right? Again, Church of the Highlands, it was like, here's your Kemper. You're just like, thank you. Do I get to play next week too? Can I come back the other 6 days when nobody's around? Do some demos or something. So yeah, and it does vary from church to church. That's the thing. That's so funny, dude. That's so funny. There we go, Brad. Okay, there we go. Too old to sludge around a big amp nowadays. I love the way that the tech stuff just gets obliterated. I should not say. I get it. My new amp is a Blue Breaker style cabinet. Thank the Lord for wheels. Amen. Come on, wheels. I love that. Boom. And this is the thing, is what I love about this is, like, look, we're not always going to be in agreement about our opinions, but when we can just go, okay, what's the path forward, right? And I think, it's a great time for us to be finding a common path forward. Oh, there we go. Okay, all right. Hang on a second. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Melissa, I actually missed the first half because I was cooking dinner. Notice you didn't miss the part where I started talking about the Klon. Instead of a fancy new pedal, yeah, she caught that. Jem, I got it. What a fantastic one. All right. I've grown up in a small church. Jem, by the way, in case you don't know him, is a very, very talented young worship guitar player. Spent a bunch of time growing up in Australia, came to Nashville, spent a year there, being immersed in the midst of like the mainstream Christian and Nashville music business, and is now kind of back in Australia, back at a small to medium sized church, kind of feeling some growing pains. Like, that would be an amazing experience, but kind of hard. So I have a real heart for Jim, and he's a super talented. He's not really totally a kid anymore, but he is. So if you get a chance to look him up on social media. All right. Got it. What a fantastic. All right. I've grown up in a small church, served in it my whole life. I've grown up visiting big churches like Hillsong. There's no such thing as a perfect church. But what's your thought of helping each other out, even if you don't go to that specific church, to serve our communities and people for God, rather than separating big church versus small local church? And have you experienced people having issues when you help serving another church that isn't yours? Do you think you should be limited to serving only in one church? That is a great question. Okay. Wow. Okay. Let me try and separate that out into all the pieces. One is, I think one of the things that probably breaks God's heart is that, imagine, when was the last time you saw Hillsong and Bethel get together and do a worship album together? Never. We have seen Carrie Joe, but the point being is that I'm not slighting them. I'm saying that, imagine the impact for the kingdom if those folks got together and went, we want to just like we want to shake the rafters down for Jesus. And again, I'm Jem, you kind of set me up for it. So if I offended anybody, that wasn't my heart. But the point being is that quite often it's like there's this stream, there's that stream, but that trickles down to the local churches. It's not super often that you see two small churches getting together and going out. We're going to go out and do this thing together. They have a tendency to have their own ministries, and sometimes there are the other thing is sometimes there is some bad blood between either leadership or people in leadership between the churches. Sometimes one church is poaching another church's congregation. It happens. There is some bad behavior that happens, and the mission gets affected by the bad behavior. I'm just saying, like, look, the whole point of quote unquote this community is like let's be honest and speak truth, so we can actually be honest and speak truth, and then figure out how do we solve some of these problems. Because you can pretend the problem's not there, but it doesn't mean the problem goes away. Unity between different churches is super important. That's a great point. And so the interesting thing, because I'm actually in exactly that situation, Jim. I have a church that Melissa and I belong to, but I've been asked to come in and help out fix some worship in another church. I actually, truth be told, have to call my pastor or send them a text and saying I need to get on the phone and just kind of go, hey, I've been asked to do this because, in the midst of COVID, I'm not a member of the core team right now. So, out of respect and out of submission to my leaders, I've actually got to go, hey, before I ever strap on a guitar at this other church where I got called, ironically, by the woman that was the vocal director at that mega church that I was at. She was like, and she didn't even try and recruit me. She was really clever about it. She's like, hey, Doug, do you know anybody? She was just like, just like, please come play. And it's not like I'm so desirable, but she was really in a really lovely way, just kind of going, I'm not going to ask you directly, do you know anybody? And just kind of, we know each other well enough that she was like, hopefully he's going to be able to just go, hey, I would love to help out. And she's an amazing woman of God. She's a great worship leader. She's a great leader. So I'm just like, how can I help? Right. So the point is, before I ever strap on and play a note and, even accept a PCO invitation, I need to actually do the right thing. And I need to make sure that they're cool with it, which they will be. But the point being, Jem, your point is really well taken. You need to make sure that in that framework that you are released to do that. And if you're not, then that's, the decisions you make have wide implications, because the covering of being under authority and being released by authority are very different than my potentially going off and just doing this and not saying, hey, I want to do this. This is okay with you guys, right? Because, they will be okay with it, but they will be much more okay with it because I actually came and said, hey, I've been asked to do this. I just wanted to bring this to you. Are you okay with this? And do I have your blessing, right? That is a different conversation than like, Doug, somebody saw you online with this other church and we've been doing this online thing. What is this? That's a way different conversation than like, hey, I've been asked to do this. This is okay. Some people are going to be okay with it and some people aren't, Jim. And at a smaller churches, one of the other definitions of small-minded is kind of like, you need to bring your first fruits to this church, and this church only. We're small enough. We need that. And you're so talented, arguably, they might feel that way. Now, that said, leading upwards is that you have the benefit of being able to go, hey, you know what? I'm going to get a chance to learn some things that I think I can bring back here that will be a benefit and will help me grow. And you state your case, and you do so. You show up prayed up. You've been praying about it long enough in advance that you're like, God, if this is what you want for me, let me make sure I've done all the things that I can do, such that I'm coming in with your covering and your anointing, such that it's not like, well, Jem just wants to do this because Jem wants to do this, as opposed to like, Jem took it to God, he got the yes, he's coming in and said, look, I've been praying about this a lot, I get a yes in my spirit about this. I want to bring it to you. I really want your blessing. It matters to me, and here are the benefits it's going to bring our church. And I'm really believing and hoping you'll be able to release me to do this. And, you do it in a way that is honoring to your leaders, and they'll love you for it, because it's much better to have somebody do it as opposed to like, oh, I can't serve this Sunday. It's just like, oh, okay. But it's never easy. Right. And, different communities, especially when they're Jem, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you go to a Filipino church, correct? So there are nuances to that community that there are pieces that I won't understand. So that kind of like, well, why would you go be there? This is your community, where that's a lot harder to that's harder and that's complicated, and I don't think I can speak to that well. Um, but yeah, there are people that have the jealousy factor. I'm fortunate enough that I bring enough and contribute enough in the different situations that I contribute, that my contribution so far exceeds my um, not in the traditional word meaning of the word compensation, because most of the time I've never been paid to as a worship guy, never. Like when I first before I got saved, I got paid, and after that, I don't. I got paid a little bit, but most of it's always been for free. Um, you know, so when it came to actually playing guitar, just like nah. So the point being is that the reward of being able to contribute one's gifts is huge. So the point being is, I think, um, the so let me just reread this left. There's no such thing as the perfect church. Absolutely. What are my thoughts of helping out, even if you didn't go to that specific church? Honestly, Jam, one of the biggest challenges for somebody like yourself, and I certainly, you might have heard me say it earlier here, is like if I were in Sydney, I'd be going to Hillsong, but it's also because Melissa went to Hillsong. That's the church where she came up. For somebody, Hillsong has been, my guess would be, unfairly targeted for quote unquote poaching musicians like yourself. Where, for somebody like yourself, there are things you can learn at a Hillsong that you wouldn't necessarily learn at a small church. That said, there are things that you can learn in bringing excellence to the team that honestly only somebody with your level of gifting could bring. And you're needed there. So the ultimate thing comes down to is what God's telling you. Is God telling you, I need you to spend a little time going over and playing at Hillsong so you can see how that's done, so you can bring that back to your church? Is God telling you, you know what, Jem? I want you going to Hillsong because of things I'm preparing you for that you can't see in this season. And I need you to be in a situation that is a larger situation for you so you can see this other level of production. Or you may just say, Jem, you're going to get that when I'm ready to give it to you. And this season is now. I'm going to believe you've already prayed about all of that. But at the same time, judiciously, sometimes, we're always just hesitant as to which foot, whether we move ahead or we stay, And sometimes it's good to just get that affirmation from other people. Stay tuned to the Holy Spirit. You'll hear what you need to hear. It's a great question. Great question. Love that. Coffee with Pastor, good. My aunt faces me. I allow everyone their own. It's just keeping it down so one person can do their job. There we go. LJ, good. My guess is you are a pastoral type. Coffee with Pastor. There we go. And there you go. I allow everyone their own. But this is the other thing. Then it's just like when you at the point that you actually start letting people bring the amps up, it's kind of like, look, this is cool until it's not. If you can't control yourself, and the same thing, let's go back to the snare drum thing. It's like, let me not be a total snare buster and just say, look, and the problem is that, again, if we look at the practical, with the exception of the megachurch, where the size of the room was big enough so the snare drum couldn't actually ruin worship, pretty much every other place that I played, snare drum was just too loud. And the drummer could not actually rein it in. And there's a reason they have electric drums, in worship. And that snare thing it's the biggest offender to a bad mix. I'm just gonna say it. I don't care. If I were a drummer, So the thing is, like, look, if, and here's the thing, with a digital console and a team that wants to actually work together, you can come in, you can get a mix, you can create a scene for that board, pull it up, you're good to go. It takes, a Saturday afternoon, LJ, maybe you buy everybody some pizza. We get it dialed. We get a great drum and bass mix. We're like, you know what? This is cool. You may actually find that you like that other snare drum so much. You're like, you know what? Church's going to buy a new snare drum. We're going to buy that one. And, the other thing, though, about the snare thing is actually not just the drum itself, where they pitch the drum to. And this is the real killer. Is in the same way most guitar players don't want to be told, like, can you turn a little less drive? Boy, if you want to poke me on a Saturday morning, can you get a little less drive on that sound? I'm just like, and I'm usually pretty good about like, sure. I'd be happy to get more drive on that thing. Come here. You know what I'm saying. You're like, oh, my tone wasn't good enough for you. So it's like, there's all these conversations. You're like, sure, give me a second. I'll tune it down. I'll turn it down. Mind you, I have to rewrite every preset that's over here. I'm not going to say that. That conversation is all going on in here. And I'm smiling. And I'm having the right attitude. Because I don't want to be the one that ruins the vibe of Sunday morning. Right? Like, that's the thing. Is like, I might not be happy about it. But I don't want to make you unhappy about it. That's just not cool about it. I don't want to make you unhappy. Because I was like 5. And I want to turn my drive down. It's my drive pedal. How do you know? You're just a volunteer sound person. I am so-and-so, and you're just a sound person. You don't know anything. Like, do I really want to be that person? Or more importantly, do I really want to have to apologize for being that sound person? Or being that person to the sound tech and to the worship leader, like, in the 20 minutes after the service where I kind of like, I did it again. Really? Seriously? I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to be that that person where, like, I did it again. I've been there. I just, like, I'd much rather just, like, absolutely let me turn the drive down than you're going to be like, oh, I turned into that guy. And I haven't done that for a long time. But that guy hangs out in there. He would be very happy to give some, snarky comments like, oh, and the expert on guitars sitting there back there behind the console. That is a dangerous road to start going down because it gets personal. One of the things about this season is people have gotten really mean personally. It is not how we want to behave in church. It's not how I want to behave in church. I'll tell you that much. Coffee with the pastor. I love coffee with the pastor. Chris, your service should include everything that you can. I love that. If you can't physically, financially, you should approach other musicians first to help. Then you should ask your church for help. I love that. That's great. Amen. In other words, are you saying that the church that I'm going to go volunteer and help out with worship, I should ask them for that clon? No. All right. It's just a thought. If your front of house has lots of sensory turns, you can also control the amps. The bass guitar comes out of the bass amp, but control of the board. Yep. There are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of options. Chris, there we go. This is so funny. I don't play at a church. I'm curious things are how they're done. I've actually kind of known that as I've been watching this. Chris, I love you to death. You know that. You are one of my favorite people in the world. Your hunger to learn never ceases to bring a smile to my face. And I love that about you. Absolutely love that about you. Well done. Here we go. I sniffed you out. Amen. I am the pastor and the worship pastor looking for who is going to help. Do you know any guitar players? Laugh out loud. Do you provide an amp? But I love it. Preach it. Come on. Woohoo. There we go. All right. Matthew, what's going on? Amen, brother. God knows his kingdom and we get to be there. Amen. Just saying, we make it our own. Love the new stuff. Been doing WTK. Right. We the Kingdom. They are very, very cool. Our way. And that's it, right? Because you're never gonna sound like We the Kingdom unless you're We the Kingdom. Just saying it. All right, hang on. Let's jump over to Facebook here for a second. Here, that's been great. Okay. I love Highland worship. Come on, bring it. All right. Here we go. Okay, hang on a second. Let me just scroll down here for a second to see if Jem responded to that. All right, Burning Hot Potato. Oh, that's great. Hang on a second. Oh, we got a couple from Jem. Let me see if he jumped back in there after that. Oh, Rick Costa. Hello, my friend. Okay, okay. Amps in church even necessary nowadays with all direct tone. All right. Oh boy, he's just going there. Are amps even necessary? We got lots of stuff to scroll to. Okay. Um, Jem, do me a favor. If you were still able to hang out, give me some feedback about my feedback. Absolutely, Brett. Uh, Small churches can still do big things if you're willing to learn and apply yourself. The internet can help you grow bigger than your physical community. Amen. During COVID-19, from March to September, we reached over 20,000 people. There you go. Half of that was in five services. We had over 50 people get saved. Come on. And we're even able to send discipleship materials to help connect them deeper. You can do things from a smaller place. And this is where being small-minded actually really becomes missional, right? So let's just say, just a wacky idea. So just bear with me for a second. I'm going to use an analogy that's going to make sense here. So I am in my mainstream endeavorings. I'm around lots of people that have varying levels of influence. One of whom is a manufacturer that I spend a lot of time with crafting some of the stuff that we're going to get to do together. And we were talking about another entity that's in the gear influence space, and just kind of how they were kind of like, things were a lot easier when we were smaller. Big seems great until you get there and you're kind of like, we got big problems, and big problems have lots of downstream implications. The idea is like, we're only going to be this big, and and I've never hang on. Let me back up from that. Just saying, all right, we're going to be this big in this season. That's all we're shooting for. We don't want any more. We don't really want any less. This is the number we're really wanting for, and we're going to gear. This is what God is telling us. So we're going to gear everything to make it such that our tent is this big, and we're capable of feeding and serving a tent that big. And boom, we roll that out, right? That preparedness, that sort of small-mindedness, you can achieve a huge amount of things, especially if you are called to digitally bring excellence. Because if I'm not thinking about, the parking lot and 5 million people coming and going between services, we got to have 20 million kids, people, and all that other stuff. So we're like, we've got an amazing online thing. What we do is we've got these amazing visionary ways that we present this content to an online streaming audience that is the best, because we've got this blah 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 winning video person, we've got this worship person that's this, and we're able to put together this amazingly engaging experience where our pastor just knows how to bring the word and makes it. See, here's the deal. It's like, not everybody, like, I remember we took my mom to, we were kind of auditioning a larger church in the area, and we took my mom there, and she was like, she didn't like anything about the experience. She was like, it was too loud and I didn't like the message. And the message was this kind of, one of the things about a big church is quite often it comes with this big giant message. And my mom was like, I couldn't connect with that at all. As opposed to somebody that is speaking as if they're speaking to each person in the room, because they can actually see each person in the room. It's a markedly different experience. And Brett, local, afar, I'm with you. That is very cute. Thanks so much, Tammy. That is lovely. Thank you. Awesome. Rodney, I play at a small church in Melbourne. Good on you, mate. About 50 people on average, and yes, I would love to play my lead at a 10,000 person stadium, but what the people get out of worship is amazing. For myself, it's very spiritual. I play an old Strat through a new deluxe Tone Master. My man, come on. Via a Boss ME80, come on, bring it on. Great effects on a budget. There's nothing budget about an ME80. That's a great unit. There are more expensive units, but that's a great unit. I will let you know that Neil Sean of Journey was playing through an ME processor for a long time because he loved the way it sounded. They sound great. And this is the other thing, is like, they're like, well, it isn't the latest thing. So what I got to say about that. Love. Oh, I got a quote. Oh, replying to Melissa. I love the idea about coming together. That can happen at times, and it should be what a church is like. Definitely, I definitely have had the experience with leadership being threatened if you serve in another church. I 100% being planted your home church. Thank you. I missed that piece because that's really important. And sowing seeds there, but also coming together at the right time to serve the church as a whole. Amen. Um, I'm going to follow through because we got Jim back. All right, burning hot potatoes. How do you get people over offense from people in the church, especially small churches? I feel those are the ones that hurt people the most. Okay, first of all, I got a chance to put on one of my favorite caps. I get a chance to put on the Pastor Doug cap. My in the mainstream world, my favorite hat to put on is the teacher hat. In church, my favorite one is to put on Pastor Doug, and I don't get a chance to do it that often. Leading people through offense is letting people know that they're going to be offended in church. The leadership of leading people through offense happens before the offense happens. It's creating a culture where being right is less important than finding unity in our differences. And I've had some really not good experiences in church that are still I'm still working my way out of emotionally, if I'm really honest. Like they really singe you. But if the leaders had been focused on unity, which they weren't, then it would have been a different thing. When leaders are leading people towards unity, I will get back to the quote of the day. When you have unity, you have miracles. When your people are not unified, that's not the atmosphere that's welcoming for God to come and inhabit praises, because people are so busy bickering, they're not praising. To answer your point strategically, not every leadership infrastructure is capable of preventing people at each other. That is one of the reasons it's so important, after there have been differences, that you actually sit down and do, to whatever extent, a mediation. And it has to be a mediation where, before the mediation starts, people actually have some very specific understandings that you're not going to leave the mediation offended, if possible. And here's the thing: you can't tell people what to do, but within all reason, as to say, look, we are going to resolve this. Are you prepared to leave this meeting and to leave? And by the way, the resentment and the hurt, it's only going to eat you up. Are you prepared to lay that down and to move forward? And you prepare people for that moment. And then you get both sides ready to do that and just say, okay, unity is the most important thing. Wouldn't you agree? Is unity more important than the thing that happened? Yes. Can we forgive each other? Bring out the word. Bible's pretty clear about forgiveness. Can we do this? Amen. Not easy. And there are leaders who will basically do everything that they can. That was God going, don't do that. Everything that they can to not actually put themselves where there's any conflict, and that's human flaw. And sometimes they can still be great leaders, but the deal is that where there are people, there will be conflict. It's going to happen. A wise leader dismantles the conflict as early as possible, such that you don't have a bunch of people. It's like, you ever seen these courtroom scenes in the United States where two different families, some terrible thing has happened, and the families are attacking each other in the courtroom? It's like, that's what happens when it festers long enough. That's where the enemy gets into the grooves and really creates that division. And if you remind people of that, just saying, that's not what you want. That's not really what you want. And the other thing is that if somebody's really done something wrong, it's really good for them to just kind of go, I was wrong, and I'm sorry for that. And for the other person to actually go, and I forgive you. Because what happens, and I've had some situations in ministry where I had some serious differences with people, and through a contrite heart, the healing that happened, we actually ended up becoming extremely close because we chose to put our differences behind us and chose to move forward. In turn, when leadership did not choose to invest in solving those differences, still just as polarized from the people that I was polarized with then. And it was extremely hurtful. And leadership just chose to not fix it. Now, interestingly enough, if I were totally honest, that happened multiple times in the same church. And I should have just figured out the first time that church did not have a spirit of reconciliation to it. And I should have just learned my lesson once and just kind of going, you know what? What I need, I can't get here. But because of familiar, I came back and basically had like the same thing happen with, just a slightly different cast of characters. I should have, instead of seeking the familiar, kind of gone, is the best thing. Now, in the moment, it seemed like a great thing. And as an end result, I learned a bunch of really valuable things in leadership that was clearly where God wanted me. And very clearly, God used that situation to go, your time has been served. You're free to go. But it was an extremely hurtful situation. And arguably, when God puts us in situations where we are hurt, usually it's because he enables us to then have that compassion for others so we can walk alongside them, kind of go, I feel your pain. I've been there. I understand it. It was extremely destructive and it was extremely hurtful. But as an end result, I am a wiser, most of the time more gentle leader and more judicious, and also recognize things as they're on the horizon and just kind of go, this gets fixed now. That is an important piece of this thing. Is instead of letting things, offense it is kind of it's kind of like if you have a garden, the first mole, if you don't kind of trap that little sucker, by spring the next year you're going to have a lawn filled with holes and gophers and moles. So the point being is just like, you better nip that puppy in the bud, because when that stuff starts festering, it gets nasty fast. Yep. Yes, sirree. Let's head over to the tube of you real quick. There we go. All right, there we go. I love Highlands worship. Amen. Growth track. Give me the info. So if you hang on a second, right keyboard. Give me just a second. Growleader.com, I think. Hang on a second. Growleader.com. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hang on. I got to read something to you, which you guys love. This is what's great. Leading church doesn't just happen on Sunday. It's an all-day, everyday hustle to reach, plan, organize, create, implement, and execute all that we've been called to do. Come on, that's why Grow exists, to provide tools, training, resources, and events that serve the church as we all seek to grow the kingdom. Come on, I'm just like, we exist to grow. To grow means to never settle, to never rest. And obviously, settle has a number of different things, but that means just to settle for less than God's best, right? To never stop seeking all that God has called us to be. Every day brings new perspective, new questions, new solutions. The local church exists to reach the lost, so it's our mission to grow. And that doesn't necessarily mean in size. Gotta love that. So growleader.com. I wonder if I can craft that down here without breaking the internet tonight. There we go. And that's it right there. Okay, awesome. Yes. Oh, let's see. Let me put this someplace up here that's not going to get in the way. Just get some of this. A clone. Thou shalt not clone. Funny. 60-80 on Sunday morning is more than than the other church in town. So maybe we were not small. That's funny. It's all relative. Yes, it is. Melissa Doppler, my favorite. Tom Cameron, what's going on, my man? How are you? Oh, look at this. From guitar church speaker to musical spiritual mentor, Tom Cameron is a dear, dear, dear old friend. So, Tom, we actually mentioned, I don't know if you were on here when we were talking about, there was, I don't remember which city it was, and actually wouldn't be appropriate for me to mention anyway, but we were doing a guitar church. So, Cameron's the founder of Guitar Church, which is this amazing Christian guitar outreach in Canada. And it's just great. And so that's Tom brought me up to Canada a bunch of times, an amazing opportunity. Tom, I was telling the story, we were at this one church where the pastor, we were hanging out with them after the service, and we were talking about, sharing vision, and they'd said, hey, is I'm supposed to share the vision with the congregation, and in the framework of the conversation was, sometimes the pastors are just figuring this thing out too. They don't always have somebody next to them, which, by the way, gets me to the other point that I forgot to make then, is that ideally every leader should be seeking somebody to be above them, seeking that counsel so they have somebody that's in their ear kind of going, hey, these are the things that you're missing. Tom, great to hear. How are you, my friend? Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Woohoo! Let's make a point of being in touch soon. Great to hear from you. I got a lot of something going on in my head. Melissa would not say this whole Klon conversation is good at all. Dean, hey man, I'm in your same boat. We could really use some musical help as well. Here's the thing, Brad. All right, so let's back up a step and talk about vision casting. And I'm going to probably go for another 8 minutes or so. One of the things, and I've talked about this a couple of times, but we're getting painfully close to the point where I'm actually going to create a format for this show. And it's not that it's like, it's set in stone, we're doing, it will be in some ways similar to a church service in that there are things that you expect, but you don't always show the same movie. You don't always have the same message. You don't always have the same songs. But part of what I want to bring is, talking about, the new tools for worship, like these guys. Instead of talking about them in periphery, actually going, hey, here's what this amp sounds like with, I don't know, this effects processor. Here's what this processor with amp modeling sounds like direct. And here are these people that we're going to bring on. And the idea is what's going to happen is it will be formatted such that in theory you'll be able to come in and I could really use some musical help as well. So the idea is like, all right, well, here we're going to focus, this week we're talking about this musical concept. So we're going to pull up a chart of this song. It's in this key. This is how we apply the diatonic numbers to it. All right, now what we're going to do is, I've talked before about putting dynamic numbers 1 through 10. Such that we then bring those tools back to our worship team. It was funny. I was watching a guitar player who I know from John Petrucci's guitar camp, which is one of the camps I teach at. And I was watching them play, and I was watching their right hand, and they're a really good player. But I was like, there they are, classic guitar player thing, hitting every note with the same exact volume with the right hand, completely unaware that they were doing it. I love this guy. He's a beautiful guy. I am praying that he's going to just kind of go, hey, Doug, could you give me a couple of tips? I'm just praying. I'm not going to introduce myself to that because that's not how I like to work. But literally, I'm watching him and I'm going to gotta go, if I could have a half an hour or 2 half-hour lessons, I would transform. It's not like I'm some special thing, but I'm like, I would transform this guy's guitar playing. I'm like, all right, now play at 1, now play at 10, now move between those different dynamic ranges and be like, I didn't know. And so there are a number of things that happen across that. One is your volume comes up and down, so there's peaks and valleys. Just like human expression, you have emphasis on certain notes and quiet emphasis on others. You're filling all the space with lots of things and painting with space. Most guitar players are completely unaware of that. They just kind of meander around because nobody's told them. So the point being is like arguably kind of, I got to write this down. So it would be the 10 things nobody told the ... drummer, bass player. So I'm writing course curriculum. I'm all about course curriculum. But the point being is, what it will be is kind of a series of things, and then vehicles that somebody like yourself can come back to your team, and be able to work with either personally or together. Um, uh, Brad, thank you. Pleasure. Love that guitar. Have a great night. Thanks so much. Um, so the idea is that we get a chance to serve one another in this fashion, and I'm excited about kind of being able to provide a greater, um, a better level of support to what it is that we're doing here by providing better and better content. And so by being able to kind of categorize content into if you will kind of chapters or something, I think that's going to be great. Um, all right, let's see here, Tammy. It doesn't matter what people are shy to worship. Jesus is loud and fierce without inhibition. Amen. I'm waiting for the true worship. Come on, bring it on. Love it. Jam, another hot topic. Why do people get a big head when they get a leader title? Big or small church, and how can we bridge the gap between members and leaders? Well, I'm surprised. Oh, there she is. Yeah, no. Okay, hold on a second. Melissa talked about her. I can't believe. Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, we're gonna go a little bit longer than. Oh. All right, we're not going to be able to finish this by 8:30, and I'm okay with that. So I'm all in. So let's do this. Okay. All right. Jim, that's a great question. So here's the thing. I can't believe Melissa didn't say it because this class. I'm just basically the book of Melissa. That sounds like that didn't quite come out. If Melissa had a book in the Bible, it would basically be my filled with a bunch of my favorite interpretations of how to make the most out of church life. Um, Leaders have two types of authority: delegated authority and authority. You don't have to have a title to lead people in authority. You don't necessarily have. There are times that people get put into a position of leadership because leaders see the gold in people and want to bring that out in them. And sometimes people are in the process of being refined. And it is easy to judge people for their inability to do the standard of what would be expected of the leadership title that they're in. And there's lots of conversation around, if somebody's not ready to do something, they shouldn't be put in a position. If they're doing a bad job, they shouldn't be allowed to continue to do that thing. There's a whole range of other conversations, but the reality is, hang on. Oh, here we go. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. That was word Bible Gateway, which I kind of check in with before I try and do any work in the morning. I was like, oh, that was a timely message for today. Regardless of what the outcome is, God is going to be challenging some people to actually figure out what that means for them. Jim, as it means for you, it's just like sometimes we just have to be submitted to the authority. And sometimes, we find that sometimes we end up leaving a church. I've left a couple, and that's just part of this process, and it's usually pretty hurtful. Get over to your. No, that's not it. Hang on, number 4. What are you? No, number 5. There we go. Okay, so here's the thing. Bridging the gap between members and leaders, which is the heart of your question. Growth Track is a really great vehicle for that, because what's happening is that people are being released into leadership quite frequently by the quality of their servanthood. And this is kind of the whole thing is, right? As we grow in our ability to serve, we in theory grow in our ability and our wisdom to lead others, because we've had the same experiences. So this is one of the reasons that why the discipleship model is so important. As we're, a classic thing that happens in smaller churches is you've got a sound tech that will not relinquish control of the soundboard because nobody can do it as well as they can. This is a huge problem. I don't care if the sound's terrible. If we at least get some new people learning how to make the sound good. And the way you do that is you have people shadow you. But, quite often what happens is like, no, it's too complicated. And sound techs are particularly bad about raising up people that come with them. It just is. I've found that repeatedly over and over and over. It's too complicated, And, the reality is that, there's only so many drummers in the building. Sorry. The reality is that there is a lot that goes into mixing. But if you're not, creating the opportunity for others to serve in a role that they're passionate about, and you're not raising people up, you're failing to serve your church responsibly. And, so that there are different roles and, and responsibilities in different churches about how it's perceived. I believe in the concept of a servant leader. The idea is that leading people is really about serving them. It's a matter of looking at their needs, looking at how, if I get you the set list late, I am making it harder for you to have a joyful experience serving on the worship team. If I send you a YouTube video that's in the wrong key, I make it harder for you to actually prepare your part so you can support the worship leader as they're leading the congregation. These are things that I've learned because I've had amazing leaders. Not everybody has amazing leaders. It's why Growth Track is really such a valuable tool, is it enables people to have a process that they on-ramp. It's one of the reasons it's so exceedingly popular, because it works. So Growth Track would be the simple answer to that. The other thing, again, hang on, I'm starting to read Melissa. So how can we bridge the gap between members and leaders? Honestly, Growth Track is actually the practical answer. And here's the thing is that if somebody gets a big head when they get promoted into that role, there are a couple of different ways to approach that. One, you have the ability as a member of a team to go to that person's leader and go, I'm having a problem with this. I know I need to go to them. If you don't have the ability to go to them, kind of go, I'm having a real problem with your leadership style. Is there something I'm missing? And you give them the opportunity to, and let me back up. Let me figure out how we do this. So we meet for coffee, right? I'm just going, hey, you could find a way, because again, the leading up thing is about finding the door in. It's not a matter of like, well, I am offended and this and that. It's a matter of like, hey, I used to be able to relate to you so well, and just like, I'm having a hard time. And there are a couple of things that I just need to talk with you and understand. Like, maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but like, this has been hard for me. And explain your heart. And this is one of the things, is that when it's like, this is what it is for me, and not make it about them, but make it about, this is the way this situation affected me. Were you aware of that? And one of a couple of things will happen then. They will go, well, you're just a loser, and you just need to learn to take my lead and just shut up. Or they're going to go, I had no idea. And you know what, honestly, here's the other thing is what you don't necessarily know is quite often leaders are, first of all, under a huge amount of spiritual attack. They get promoted into a position of leadership. Quite often they're not ready for it, and they know it. So what do they start doing? They stick their chest out a little bit further because they just don't know how to kind of go, I'm now expected to have the answers, and I don't have the answers. So what ends up happening is they just kind of develop a little bit of bravado, where they're really kind of going like, I thought I wanted this, but I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing in this role. And they start behaving strangely. Like, usually, again, the why, you kind of begin to go, well, why? And is it really them being cocky and kind of, or is it just kind of like they're just like, I don't know how to do this. But quite often, just kind of like the heart to heart, you meet with them first. Got that backwards. Don't go to the leader. Go to them first. Then, if you have the meeting with them and it turns out badly, then you do go to the leader and just go. I sat down with them. I went to the meeting. It didn't go well. I think the three of us need to meet. Then, what you're enabling that situation to do is you're enabling the leader to come in, the leader of the leader to come in, and either solve the problem or not. That's a different conversation, right? Keep me posted. My soul prefers certain worship teams only. That's an interesting take. I think the danger of that when we play on a worship team is that we have to watch that preference, right? So just kind of going, well, what does the congregation really prefer? And I totally feel you. Like, I know that there are certain worship teams that I'm just like, I rest there. I remember that first time I heard Jesus Culture, I was like, I could rest here a long time. But then, congregation, that may not be the same. But I feel you. Melissa to Jem. I have seen it in massive churches and tiny churches. The old saying, hurt people, is pretty true. It's important to get to the real cause of the hurt and walk alongside people. But it's a tough one for sure. I feel discouraged when I don't feel the song when it's overpowered by tinniness. It's an interesting thing, Tammy. I spent some time today on a call with a guy from a microphone manufacturing company, and we were talking about sound for video. They make very, very nice, expensive microphones, and what he was basically saying is, and there was another interview that they'd done where part of the conversation was about people never see the person that's actually doing the sound for the most part. So it's kind of, there is this so much emphasis on what's in front of us when we're facing forward, whether it's in a movie theater, watching a video, that we're very often unaware of what's going on to the sound. And we shouldn't be as unaware of it. And we should be pouring more resources and making that better. So it's best when everyone is harmonizing together. Mike's on. Tell me about it. That's one of the other things that, worship teams don't do a great job with, is that you get, in any choir that you've ever been in, there is a choir director, and usually at some point they're going to get either individual section together around a piano or the sections around together, and everybody learns to get the blend. Sometimes it starts with a lead from each section. They get the blend. The rest of the section starts to come in, and that way you can kind of go, hey, you're a little flat there. Just work on your pitch. All right? Don't be hesitant on your note. Don't find the note kind of by going above below. Go straight to the note. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Now, I'm going to bring back the people in the back. You're going to start now. And you rotate people through. So, that's just... That's so funny. Tammy, where's Lincoln Brewster? Anyone I'm asking? He's around. I spoke to Lincoln on Sunday. He's doing good. You're going to be hearing a lot from Lincoln Brewster soon. He's doing quite well. All right, Jem. Listen, it's tough. It's very sad. It shows how human we are and how much we need Jesus. Here's the great thing about this, Jem, and I would encourage you to be encouraged. It is easy to, if we're not careful, to lose faith. And I'm gonna gently turn your words around you, but for a good reason. We see how people make these mistakes, and it reveals how much they need Jesus. But the redeeming part of that is like, Jesus is going to get in there in his own way and time, right? And here's the thing is that I'm going to say this to you with loving affection because we're friends. Your emotional vulnerability to that situation is part of the same dynamic that offense can live in. So I would encourage you, and it's just one of the things about being a little bit older, just kind of going, let me take a step away from the intensity of my emotions. Because I totally feel you. Literally, I feel you. But as I've gotten older, I kind of go, okay, let me not monitor, and this is some good stuff here. So listen to me, my friend. If you monitor stuff through the lens of your emotion, it will always cloud your ability to see real wisdom in the situation. Because emotion and wisdom operate on two different verticals. If you've seen wise people at work, they may be excitable, they may be passionate, but most of the time you don't see them respond in emotion. Like when you see me talking about the snare drum and that stuff, that is exactly my problem area. And the other thing is self-introspect. It's like, you spend a lot of time I think you have a huge internal dialogue, lots of stuff going on. A lot of my dialogue is externally facing. That's a real liability. The problem that you have is that this all happens inside. It gets very, very, the oxygen gets hard to find in the midst of that much intensity. My problem is the oxygen gets spent with words. You can't take those words back sometimes. So I've had to really learn to just kind of go, I need to take the emotion thing and I just need to be able to turn it off for a second. That doesn't mean not feel the emotions, but when I need to be in leadership mode, I can't be in reaction mode. I can't lead with wisdom and be reacting simultaneously, because the two, basically this guy we were talking to today was talking about when they're going into these places and they're leading worship, basically the enemy can't live there because the spirit of praise of Jesus is there. Like all these situations, like basically these non-believers can't exist in the light, and they just can't be there. And so that the Samuel in each of us, there's a reason Samuel's in the Bible. We're all supposed to learn from Samuel. There's a reason Ephesians is so popular. The wisdom of the people that we want to be like, walking like Jesus with the grace and the mercy and all these qualities, right? So, and we here's the thing. We are in our flesh. We are who we are uniquely. That passion is what makes you such a brilliant musician. The challenge is what makes you a brilliant musician is not always what's going to make you a great leader. And you have to find the other verticals inside yourself and develop those gifts as well. Not easy, but incredibly rewarding. Very, 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 very special stuff to be able to do that. Okay, let's see here. All right, good. All right. Oh, boy. Okay, Jam, does the music we play in church affect how we invite people come to our church? Absolutely. It gets back to the Eastman guitar. And my analogy was like, if Jeff knew that I was going to be coming, I was like, oh, my buddy Doug's coming, or Jeff knows me but doesn't know I'm coming, and I show up and he's like, oh, that's great. He's going to think I'm some jazz, or so the external version. Jeff, let me be really clear. If you're just submitted to what they want, God's going to show up through that. But the analogy, if I saw somebody that was my age playing a big jazz box, no delay, no reverb, I go, we got a jazz person that's so enamored with what they do that they wouldn't kind of find the sound of what the church thing is about. And if I were that person and somebody like, oh, here's Doug, he's come to, he showed up at my church, he's in town, whatever, and all of a sudden I'm like, he has no idea. And you don't go out after the service and go, Doug, they didn't let me do this. You can't do that. You just got to get to go. And there are lots of times in my life that I just have to choose to take the high road and just kind of go, I actually can't tell the story. God will figure it out for me. There are times you just fall on a sword. It happens. Falling on a sword doesn't feel good, but what it does is it strengthens you. And God, again, it's that whole thing, unity, is miracles come out of unity. So sometimes you just have to do things, and it's out of that atmosphere that other things are born. And we can't see them until they're born. right? We have to play our part in the atmosphere out of which those things are born. If the atmosphere precedes the things being born, we can't possibly see the things that are the outcome of the atmosphere because the atmosphere comes first. Can't see it. Um, let's see. Yeah, the danger, Tammy, is that it can be big projects, but not all big churches, fortunately, do that. So that is one thing, but it is a danger. And the other thing is again, when I was talking about small mindedness, and I will say this as well, is that arguably, and you can't slice and dice and say big churches should be doing big church things, small churches should be doing small churches things. But if one were to say, generally speaking, big churches should be taking care of the big church thing, like feeding the homeless and taking care of the widows and the orphans and all of that, then the smaller churches could be focusing on coming on alongside the larger churches, learning more about how they do those things, but also focusing on their smaller community, right? So I think there's a balance between finding that. I think we don't spend enough time to be doing that. Henry, I love this. I used to be worried about showing empty seats, but I've learned how. Hold on a second. I used to be worried about showing empty seats, but I've learned now how to have the approach of framing things to give the message that we still have room for one more or a few to join us. Love that. Touche. Really, really well done, because if it seems like the seats are there, all of a sudden it's like there's no room for me. Well done. Good and faithful servant. I love that. Well done. Dean Anderson, you may know I've been looking for a new amp. I finally settled on the Dr. Z DB84. Those Dr. Z amps are great. Hard to find one because they went out of production. Well, I finally got one in a 212 Bluesbreaker style cabinet. It's really, really loud, even on half power, in all but a double stack world. And yes, I need an attenuator already, but I love the way it sounds and breathes. Awesome. Completely without pedals, does everything so well. So even though I've long used Line 6 gear, really loving the tube amp right now. Way to go, Dean. Congratulations. I remember it's a funny story. I'll go gear for you just because tonight's been kind of intense. So I remember it's around here somewhere. I went and bought a Dynacomp because I was like, well, I've got to have a Dynacomp. And that's actually really pretty much my favorite compressor. That particular compressor, I just love the sound. And the guy had, I think it was a Gia or some Dr. Z amp. And I show up and I'm playing through this guy's amp with his compressor, and he's looking at the compressor, and he's looking at his amp, and he's looking at me, because at this point I've driven like an hour to get there, and I'm like, and I'm like, and I could tell he's thinking like, I don't want to sell this box, and I give him the money because I can already watch this, but I'm like, look, you put it on Craigslist, I drove the hour here, you kind of got to give it up. And so he says, I think I'm going to have to buy another one of these pedals. It was the funniest thing, but that amp was great. So that was my Dr. Z story. So well done. Enjoy. That's awesome. Attenuator. Yes, just be conscious that, try not to crank the power amp section too much, or else you may go through some extra tubes. Amps in church, even necessary nowadays with all the direct technology available now. Are amps. So, Jem, that's a great question. The interesting thing is, what do the guys in Hillsong do? They got a giant rack of amps playing at a bazillion dB. That's funny. Dean's amp is like, there's nothing like a loud tube amp doing what it does, because, the short version is, when you think about a preamp section and a power amp section, the power amp section is kind of where the whole tube screamer model came from. They're not talking about screaming preamp tubes. They're talking about power amp tubes overdriving. It's like an AC30. You turn that thing up and something magical happens. So I have actually, I have an audio clip or video clip, and I don't think I shared it, and I don't think I ever will share it, but it was when Hillsong United did a show with Bethel up in Reading. And so I've known Chislett for a long time. And so we went up there. And so during one of the songs off of, I'm going to forget the song, but the point being is it's this guitar breakdown. And I had a laminate so I could wander around, and I went back there and I videotaped the amps. And it's basically, just just an onslaught of volume, but the amps, it was like it's like nothing you've ever heard. And it just kind of, I mean, literally, it's in the middle of Hillsong service. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can find. Give me just one moment. Hopefully, iTunes isn't going to start playing. Hang on a second. All right, good, good. Gosh. Um, Oops, Hillsong United. Let me just see if I can find the song. But the amazing thing was, it's this particular, it's this kind of this guitar breakdown, and to hear the guitar sound and hear the tube amps, just basically the pedal boards and the delays, and then hitting the tube amps. It was like fairy dust being thrown against the wall and just kind of like the light catching it. It was just something you can't ever imagine, and it was so amazingly loud and wonderful. And I've never experienced anything like it. I've been around a lot of amps, but it was just like to hear those guys just doing that. It was just like, it was unreal. It was just unreal. Let's see. All right, it's going to be on this record, so don't start playing. All right, hang on a second. Let me see if I can find it. And if not, let's see. No, I don't want to play that. Then I'll only spend a minute more looking for it, but nope, it's not coming up. Oh, I see. That's somebody's playlist that doesn't have the song that I want. Hold on. All right, Hillsong United Wonder. Just one second. I'll be able to find it if I type on the right keyboard. Remind me never to change the position of my keyboards. Um, think it. I'll have to remember. I'll have to double check, and I'll bring the song. I won't be able to play it, but next week. But it was magical, dude. It just, the sound of it was just like. The next time we get together, it's on my phone. I'll play it for you. You'll be like. But that said, the Motley stuff's so good. I'm just like, and the simplicity, you can't go wrong. Cannot go wrong. Rodney Morris. Someone told my guitar is too loud. It's not. My reply is I can't hear it because the drums are too loud. No offense to any drummers. It's like I would be able to. I could tell if my guitar was too loud if I weren't being drowned out by the drums. Oh, that is so funny. Oh my word. Oh, I love that. There's some great bait there. Uh, Melissa replying to Rodney. A conversation had in church, hundreds of churches every weekend. Smiley face. Ola Reverend Doppler. What's going on, Rick? Yes, Filipino mainly church. Jim. Well, I almost moved to Hillsong after a bad fallout in my last youth year back in 2015 with my church and leaders. So many people, especially my closest friends, left. But a few years ago, I hung out with a few kids, and there was no worship, and there was no youth worship team. And that's when I went, oh snap! I need to stay, or these kids aren't going to have much people to look up to. And that's the whole point. It's like there's honor in staying when it's hard. What did Jesus do? He knew what was coming. In the garden, he was like, I don't really want this, but I know this is the path, right? And there are times that we just need to follow that path. Yeah, but I guess I'm just coming from a place where the culture isn't like America, where you get asked to play in different churches and wonder why it's not as welcome over here as it should be. Here's the thing: is it's like I'll say this: is that you actually just said it yourself. And again, I'm not attacking you, so really know my heart. You just said it. It is different, right? And you just said it, so you know that it's different. But I really, embracing the difference is harder, right? You're like, but why can't it? I mean, here's the thing: is you've kind of you've had a chance to lift the curtain and just kind of go, look at the world outside of the world where I'm at, and then had to put that curtain back down and come back, right? That's not an easy path, but what God wanted you to do was to here's an analogy for you. Chislett went to UK, went to Los Angeles, fame, mainstream, and came back. Look at what has happened in his life since he went back. Now, whether it's the musical side, the production side, or the heart and the spirit side, what God is doing with and for you in this season is way more important than what he was doing with and for what he was doing with you in the season that you were in Nashville. You got a chance to do lots of things. God was like, I want to give you a taste of what the future is going to be like. But now I need you to come home and serve. And I need you to just be present in that. And I need you to kind of figure out what that's going to look like. That's not easy, especially the younger you are. But to whom much is given, much is required. But you already knew that. And again, I'm not picking on you. I know that you know that, but I just want to be really clear. Anybody that's watching this, Gem and I are dear friends. And so because of that, I have a responsibility to, and you're asking the right hard questions, because honestly, and this is what's great about this particular community is that we should be able to come together and kind of go, look, these are some of the problems that we kind of all have. Honestly, Jem, you and I have the same problems. Like, I actually need to go to my passions and kind of go, hey, I've been asked to do this, and there's always a possibility that they'll say, we would really prefer that you not do that. It's going to be an interesting thing if that's the case. I don't think that's the case. But the other thing is that, it is a, here's the thing, Jem, kind of like you and RJ, you kind of are unique and in the midst of the mix of this, because you come from a Filipino background. So you've got a world that is markedly different in your inner family world than so many of the people that you're around. And you've got to navigate how to live in both those worlds simultaneously. That's different than somebody like myself that really kind of is in this very kind of honky world. It's just like I'm, honky at home, honky at church, right? On my word, Chris Griffin texted me. That's great. Church of the Highlands. Hang on a second. He must be just like reading it. Oh no, he's sending me audio file. I hear you. No way. Oh, that's funny. He snuck on. I adore that guy. So the point being, Jem, is that you kind of have two worlds that you've got to walk in between. It's the same way I have the mainstream and the worship world. I have to figure out how to walk in between the two, and that's not always an easy balance. But here's the great thing, Jem, is like that's not actually a problem. You have a huge gift. Think about all the people inside the Filipino community who are figuring out the balance between Catholicism and Christianity, and do I even go to church? Is it cool to go to church? Do I go to Catholic church? Do I go to a Christian church? Do I go to a multi ethnic church like a Hillsong, or do I go to a Filipino church? You have an important role that you may or may not be fully aware of. And, we can never be fully aware of how God's positioning us in front of other people. We just can't. It's impossible. We can have a clue. We can try and pray about it and kind of, God, give me a reveal here so I understand, because I want to understand what things I'm doing are particularly important. But we're so busy kind of trying to make the plans for ourselves, honestly, most of the time, that we kind of don't even take the time to ask God around some of the important stuff. At least that's me. I don't know about you. But the point being is trying to figure that out is an important piece of this thing. Let me jump in on the tube of you. That's me. In shock. Okay. First of all, Dean Anderson, um, I like where you took the thread about needing musical help, but mostly what I need is more than me, Pastor. I'm just spread out. That's prayer. That's actually just praying that those people that you're needing are going to come into your world. That's prayer and fasting. And it's also, and not knowing anything about your church. That's also about replication. It's like how do we find the kid that's in junior high school that in a year and a half or 2 years from now is going to be high school, and maybe we bring them up on the worship team, right? How do we do that? And I don't know anything about whether you're in a rural area or whether you're not. But again, prayer and fasting are the first things that come to mind, because God will provide it. And arguably, here's the other thing. As I will say this, Dean, maybe your answer. And again, let's again. I like flipping the script. As we talked about this kind of this one Sunday a month that was acoustic worship. Maybe that God's just kind of going, it's you and the acoustic guitar. I don't know how to get this through to you. That's why I'm not putting these people around. Like there's some folks that can do just fine, like a Chris that I'm seeing down here, and that it was why my jaw dropped. I've watched this guy lead worship and lead me to tears at the NAM show, watching him with this intimate moment. There's nothing there. I'm getting goosebumpies. Um, there is nothing as intimate for me as watching somebody lead worship, sing their heart out, and strum an acoustic guitar, and like that's the only thing happening, because it's not about the tracks. It's not about the guitar player's Strymon bridge. Those of you who are pedalboard guys that know what I'm talking about. That's a retro term about where you got somebody Strymon things. You actually have to have them on a bridge on a pedal board so you can get to other stuff. It's not about that stuff. It's about the fact that somebody is there. Um, Sorry, let me just give a little honor where honors. I can't believe Chris. Welcome. Um, so Chris led worship at the NAM night of worship, and I was just in tears. You know, uh, yeah. And he's just such his it, and this is the thing. So like, if I could um, take my interpretation of what it was, is Chris' relationship is so deep, and his respect for that thing that he holds in his hand runs so vertical that just pours out of him. And that pouring out, that's ultimately what people respond to. They see that relationship and they go, I want that. That distillation of that in that the musical distillation of that relationship is ultimately, I guess I could say, is ultimately what people show up for, hoping they're going to get that, because they're like, it's like an ice cream cone that's dripping, that you just like, give me some of that. It's why kids take an ice cream and they mush it around with their spoon. They're like, I want that. Because somehow it's attainable. They can see that and it's tangible, and they watch the manifestation of that. And to see that at the NAM show, I was in tears. I was like, I'm just crying. It's cool, you know. But it was just that intimate experience. So the thing is that I think we have been so led into this concept that there's got to be a big giant worship team, and it's got to be this and it's got to be that. And there's lots of great stuff. Discipleship happens in the framework of that. So the thing is, like, I'm going to say this. It's so funny. I remember somebody saying this to me when I first got saved. I got so annoyed. They said, I can't believe I'm saying this. It's not about the music. I went ballistic. Melissa, the car ride home, the poor woman. She was totally right. I was just too immature musically to see that. Um, uh, it's not about the music. With Chris, it was just watching the Holy Spirit, that relationship and the depth of that relationship drip off of him, and you're just kind of like, it's so beautiful. And I'm watching this, I'm like, I want that. I want that intimacy. And and ultimately, it's a big team, a medium-sized team. It's a discipleship opportunity, and that's kind of the heart and soul of big church, little church. It's not about the big thing. The great thing about a smaller church, honestly, it's a lot easier to attain when you don't have the distraction of the parking lot backing up if worship runs over. I mean, the great thing about a one horse church, if you will, is that if you want to run long, so long as you know that there may be children backing up in daycare, and there may be some wet nappies, and the parents are actually okay with that. That freedom, again, getting back to this analogy of these kind of influencers in the gear demo space. It was easier when they were small. I'm just saying that. Um, Small church, median age 85. Nearly no young people, and of course, in COVID, not being able to sing in the church building. Um, so the great thing is, Dean, that is a recipe for really simple. And again, I think I mentioned this earlier. Um, and feedback, welcome. What's great about that is it means that you have a giant repertoire that you can bring from the acoustic guitar, and because of the delivery platform, you're able to have a wider catalog to call from, so long as you give people the repetition and the worship experience, even with newer material, right? Like, for those folks, Our God is a radically contemporary song. But the thing is that this is one of the things that I think gets lost in translation with the quote unquote older congregation. We're so busy trying to make everything change that we kind of miss that maybe one Sunday a month we only do acoustic worship, and maybe there's very little production going on that particular time. Again, the Chris McClarney experience, like, let's bring people down to the worship leader and the guitar, and just that time where you just get reduced to tears. I don't know about you guys, but I would any day of the week give up the big bright lights and the production and the LED panels and all of the whiz bang, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love it. I think it's great, but I'd much rather just be in tears going, he just crushed me. The goal wasn't to crush me. The goal was that the Holy Spirit, in the presence of what Chris was able to bring down, just took my vessel and crushed me into pieces. So I was actually going, thank you. You just broke away, because the NAMM show is a place where I'm kind of wandering around telling people how important whatever it is that I'm working on. And he was just like, let me remind you, it is not about you. It's about the people you're called to serve. And, just like, we need to be broken. Like, that brokenness is where God, kind of gets into the details, and we're kind of reminded. I was just like, thank you. It's just like that. That opportunity in median age of 85. And I will say this: you have an amazing opportunity to be the last worship leader that some of those people will ever experience. Rather than chasing the people that we've never had come through the door, those are the people that God has in your room, right? And I know that you know this because you wouldn't be here otherwise. But what a powerful opportunity to minister to those people and provide pastoral care, because, again, it's not about the music. Val was right. It's about the ability to minister in the Holy Spirit, or whatever, however you do it at your church, and just kind of get inside and just kind of help the fear and the brokenness. I'm okay with being broken such that God can put me back together more in his image each time. I like being busted apart like that, because I'm just like, thank you. I needed that. And it's just so great to be in a room and watch somebody take you on that journey, because there's care and consideration and preparation that goes into that. and the willingness to be that vulnerable, because when you see somebody in front of a microphone with an acoustic guitar willing to be that vulnerable, on one level or another, it challenges you to be that vulnerable as well. Just in the same way that when you see the impact of big giant churches with lots of bright lights, that is attractive. But again, I will say personally, I'd much rather be broken into 1,000 pieces and just kind of go, thank you, God. You just kind of reminded me. It's like, I need to, it needs to be about you. It's not about me. It's not about the bright lights. It's not, and honestly, the bright lights can be a distraction from the main event. And I realize the spirit is to worship and the heart is to worship. I'm not ragging on that, but I'm just saying, yeah. Okay. Let's see, Jem. But I guess after coming from a place, okay, there we go. Mike Fisher replying to Jem, not at all. If you can't have it on a stage, love an amp. But if you can't have it nearby to feel, I think the direct, etc. is good in my humble opinion. Yes. Okay. Folks, just, another amazing night. I am so thankful and so grateful for everybody. It's just, this is such a huge privilege to be able to come together in a small community, which I am so grateful for. You have no idea. So I'd like to, at 9:11, I would like to close out in prayer. So Lord, I just pray that we all find the way to hear from you better. And that is consciously, intuitively sensing your presence and chasing your presence, dwelling in your presence, and getting better at not leaving your presence, Lord. And I pray that anybody that's here that is far from you, Lord, I just pray, Lord, that they would have the opportunity to find their first love. And for anybody that's here that maybe has not made a commitment, Lord, I just pray that you surround them with people of faith who will encourage them to take that step. And Lord, we just give thanks for that privilege to be able to bring people into your presence who've not experienced the grace and compassion that you have. I've fallen short so many times, and you seem to always look past all that and see the things that you want to bring out and have me be more like you. I'm so thankful. I'm thankful to be able to have a community of people that just want to do more with and for you and through you. So Lord, I just pray that each of us in this week, Lord, I pray a spirit of unity in our homes, a spirit of unity in our families, a spirit of unity in our community. Lord, I just pray in the season at hand, Lord, we become the hands and the feet of Jesus and bringing that spirit of unity that this world needs so much. And so, Lord, I just pray that you equip us to do it. You inform us into how we can do what only each of us can do. I just give thanks for each of these people, Lord, and I just pray that you bless them. You bless them, and you bless them in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Whew. All right, thank you so much. What a privilege again. Next week we're going to have my dear friend Chris Rocha and Mike X Zuniga. Chris is the worship guitar player and producer with Miel San Marcos, and Mike plays bass with them. They are amazing people. They love the Lord like nobody's business or everybody's business or something. Brilliant musicians, but their heart for worship is second to none. So thank you again, everybody. Have an amazing night. Thanks again for filling my life with the experience of you and being able to share the experience of Jesus together.